First of all, I'd like to welcome you to our drone session one, the first session for our summer conference for our drone. We have a lot of stuff planned at this conference. Most of them hopefully will go as expected. Some may not. Let's face it, it happens. But we're doing the best we can. We have a lot of exciting things today. This morning, we have this event with KittyHawk, which is very important for you because it's part of our meeting our FAA requirements and our NCDOT requirements. So this is very important. This is not optional for your programs. You understand? You have to do KittyHawk. It is part of our program. It is defined what you have to do in our operations manual. We'll cover that a little later on today. So understanding KittyHawk, how to do what you need to do and doing it is very important. That's why we set this session ahead in the way it is, so that all of you can participate and can do everything you need to do. We do have in the back, I think we attached to this program a copy of the operations manual. And so in the back of the operations manual is an appendix that has a lot of screen captures and things on how to set up and do things in KittyHawk. So a lot of that can be reemphasized after this morning's presentation. So just to let you know that, we do have that now. You can please keep your microphones muted. At this point in time, we don't have the ability to mute you. We are trying to figure out what the problem with that is, because we should be able to be hosts between Kevin and myself, and we're not able to do it. So we're trying to get each of you. I'm working on that as we speak. But please keep yourself muted because everybody hears all the other background noise. You probably hear my wife's computer is making some whining noise over there right now, and like a sound. So I'm gonna mute myself a minute and try to figure out what's going on with her computer. But please do that for us. If you have a question, you can do a variety of things. You can raise your hand. There's a little sign on the bottom that says raise your hand. And let me see if I click on this. Raise my hand. And I clicked on it.
I can see it in the participants view.
You can see it?
Yes.
Okay, I don't see it on mine, interesting enough, but I guess because you're the host, I guess you see it. But raise your hand that way. You could do that. You can also go down to the chat window. You should have chat. I don't see chat on here. Do you? Kevin, do you see?
No, you're
chat?
right. No.
This is unusual because Zoom typically has a chat.
There's no chat here, but there's a chat in the system that ECU uses, but I can't get out of this window to go to that chat. I'm logged into a second computer and I can use chat through the whatever system they're using, but I can't use chat on Zoom.
How about that? So we're learning. I mean, this is the first for us. Thank you very much, Paul, for that information. So, but you can raise your hand. You can click on unmute and ask a question. What we'll try to do is periodically stop. Kevin, you can just stop periodically and say, is there any questions? And then all you do is click off your microphone and ask the question. So this is a round table process, so you can do that. We should have plenty of time to do what we need to do. Again, if you have any questions, please, if you want to jot them down, and then whenever the opportunity comes to ask the question, unless it's a burning question that really just holds you up, then wait till the opportunity is given, so we kind of have some type of a flow going on. And if you like to, you can always email me. My computer's always open. I've got, as you can see, I don't know if you can see, I've got this computer and I've got another computer running at the same time. So feel free to email me. You can also text me on my cell phone, and let me give you that number. I would put it in the chat, but I can't. So my cell phone number is 919-524-7834. Again, 919-524-7834. So hopefully you got that. If you would like to chat, email me a question, I'll be glad to bring that up also. Okay. All right. Well, without any more further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Teen from KittyHawk. He's been a great partner with us as we've gone through this process. We actually started this probably last summer when we went to the drone summit and we began this process. And we're anticipating we will continue we already have it in our budget to continue to do this. North Carolina is paying for the site for the statewide membership with KittyHawk, which is dirt cheap, by the way. And we do appreciate their efforts of being involved with us. And so we value their partnership and their support. So, and without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that, David. Yeah, glad to be a part of, this a new wave of drone pilots coming on board, because this is certainly going to be involved more and more in the day-to-day workflows of a number of different jobs.
Windstorms are coming. Later on that month, we
just so everyone else is
once again, one of the higher registrations for Western regions.
LACE, L-E-I-S. Do you mind muting as we get started here?
We only needed snow.
Thank you very much. All right, and side note, I did pull up the chat window on the CTE, the conference website, so I'll try to keep an eye on that. I'll keep an eye on the raised hands. As David said, please feel free to, treat it as a discussion. If any questions or anything like that pop up, feel free to ask those, or I'll try to leave a chunk at the end that we can also circle back on them. So as we get started here, I think it'll be useful I'll give you a little background on KittyHawk, maybe a little bit about myself, and then we're going to dive into the platform here. So I guess I can close this down. So KittyHawk has been around about 5 years at this point, and we really started, for drone operators, it was a simple flight timer. So you could start a timer, stop it, and record it for your flight activity. Obviously, recording your flight logs is the essential part of moving into a professional, Part 107 holder, a professional drone operator. And as you get more advanced, depending on the aircraft, or you might get special waivers or something like that, additional requirements get piled on top. Things like maintenance events, obviously your Part 107 compliance and making sure it hasn't lapsed or expired. All of this kind of gets tied up, and there are all these different components to track. And that's really the high level purpose of KittyHawk, is to help consolidate, keep all of our safety and compliance data that surrounds our drone program, our operators, keep it all in one central system that we can reference, whether we're reviewing pilots, or maybe we are being audited from an FAA inspector, insurance. Excellent. FAA, insurance, legal department, maybe management at a future job is asking for certain reports. So we do need to be able to interact with this data. And that's really where we see ourselves stepping in. So again, starting with that kind of flight timer idea, working with the industry, we've kind of grown in lockstep as groups have matured, programs have matured. They start to understand what information they're looking for and how they want to interact with the system to support their own drone operations. And you'll see the platform today is much more comprehensive. We have all sorts of features and functionality built in. I'm going to touch on them as we go through. There's just some highlights here on the left-hand side. Obviously we are a US-based company with US-based servers. So security we take very strongly. We just completed a very strict security standard certificate, SOC 2 Type 2, for any IT or anyone that knows what that means out there, and we're pursuing additional ones. So security is very top of mind in what we do for our clients. You may be familiar with the FAA's Before You Fly app and the big redesign that happened. We were certainly a big part of that with our airspace layers and maps being brought to Before You Fly, helping clean up that platform a little bit. So kind of in this time, we have certainly grown along with the industry, as I mentioned, but become part of a fixture as we started to offer LAANC, or LAANC, through the FAA, which is the ability to get approval to fly in controlled airspace. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like too, if you're not familiar with that. So just some highlights on the left to show off there. Forgive me if I fight with my screens a little bit. While I transition, I could tell you a little bit about myself. So my experience with drones really goes back to, you know, my youth, and I was flying RC helicopters at a young age. And I really attribute that to what propelled me down this path. You know, maybe at first I spent more time fixing them than I did flying them. But through that process, you know, learning servos and motors and prop wash and, you know, how this thing can fly and stay in the air kind of led me down this path of aviation. And I'll make a long story short. I'm an Embry-Riddle graduate. I did pursue that commercial pilot path. Started to get a little more involved in the risk management, airport management side of things. As I realized how much it would cost as a college student to keep a private pilot's license current. So it was a really interesting trajectory that led me here, but I love what I do, and I'm so glad to be a part of this program. For those of you that don't know, or that we might not have run into each other before, I am based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. So I am local myself, and that's, you know, I'm excited to be here and supporting you guys getting this going. I think this is going to be a huge success in the future. As I mentioned, drones are being incorporated more and more into the workflows of all kinds of jobs. And we see some very creative use cases today, ones you would never expect to see. That, you know, even the idea eluded me, where you hear what people are trying to accomplish with drones, and, you know, every day it's something new. So it is pretty exciting. And today, the goal of this session is to introduce you to the KittyHawk platform. We're going to start out, we're going to take a look at all the different features. I'm going to break down what we're looking at here on my screen. Then once I kind of expose the platform and the different pieces. Oh, and Nancy, I am showing two windows right now. I just saw that pop up. And then we're going to go through how the different pieces of the platform will fit together for you, and go through some initial account setup. So when we leave here today, I'd like, you know, your profiles all set up. We'll touch on the web, so you know all the different components as to, once we get started, where things will go and kind of how to file them. But I want you to leave here feeling much more comfortable on the platform, and kind of knowing, okay, I have all the different pieces and now I know how to fit them together. So this will certainly be crucial as we push forward into the new year with a batch of drone pilots coming on board. So at a very high level, and I'll say it again because I don't think I could overstate it. KittyHawk at a very high level is all about managing that safety and compliance information along with our flight activity. So we do have kind of a two-part approach for this. What we're looking at on my screen, this is my iPhone plugged right into my computer. So you'll see me pick it up and I'll poke around. And so if I show you here, there's my phone. And literally that's the same application that if you go onto the Play Store or App Store and download today, that will look very familiar. On the right-hand side is the web dashboard. This is available for everyone as well. You can get to it directly by going app.kittyhawk.io, or you could also go straight to our website. If you just Google, you know, KittyHawk drones, you can click on that link, and up in the top right, you'll see a little login button, and you can access the web dashboard as well. So with this two-part approach, each platform kind of has its own goal, right? The application is really designed more for the pilots flying in the field, giving them the right information at the time of flight, to make, you know, to give them the tools of understanding, is this a go, no-go type of flight? Am I able to legally and safely fly at this location? Then on the right-hand side with the web dashboard, this is geared a little bit more, let's say, for, you know, the teachers, the program admins out there that are going to be, you know, interested in following the pilot's activity and you know, managing and manipulating the data that the pilots are out in the field collecting. So again, that there's a lot of functionality built into the app. There's going to be a ton of parallels between the two, so I will try to point them out where we can. But just at a high level, the app you could think of for the pilot flying in the field, and the web more for the admin that's overseeing those pilots. So we're going to start. I just want to expose some of the different features and the areas of the platform. Hopefully not to throw too much at you, but I'd like to at least show you the different pieces, excuse me, as we get into this. So when I start getting into the workflows and how the pieces fit together, you've kind of already seen it a little bit. So we'll spend a little time on this, and I believe, David, you gave me the thumbs up that we could potentially give some breaks in between some of those phases, some of the different sections we're going to cover today. So definitely don't want to throw too much, want to give you digestible chunks, and we'll give some breaks where needed, but we can go ahead and dive in now.
Yeah, you can breaks that you want to. I'm still working through the claim issue, so, but yeah, give breaks as many as you need to. That's entirely up to you.
Okay, excellent. All right, so first we're going to start with the application, the mobile app here, and I think that's the best place to start because that's where most people will spend most of their time, especially the students. So I want to point out all the different ins and outs of what we can do through the mobile application. Now, obviously, just by opening up KittyHawk, you could see a significant portion of that screen is dedicated to airspace. So understanding what's around us, stadiums, hospitals, controlled airspace. As you can see just on the bottom of my map here, this colorful grid, a little bit more difficult to see that purple or magenta circle that's underneath it, indicating this is controlled airspace. The colored grid is letting us know this is part of the LAANC or LAANC system from the FAA, which is low altitude authorization and notification capability. Essentially, it is a quick, easy digital way to receive approval from the FAA to fly in controlled airspace around, some of these larger airports. So the map, we can pan and zoom a little bit, but this, if we need to explore the airspace or we want to understand it a little better, we do have the airspace maps along the bottom. So if we want more information, we can open up this tab. And it gives us a very similar view, but this time it's a little more interactive. We can pinch, zoom, pan. Along the bottom, you'll see we can use this search feature and we can pull up. Oh, yeah, good point, David. And if you do have the application or you want to go ahead and start downloading it so you can follow along, definitely encourage you do so, so that when we get to the next part in terms of setting up your account profile and potentially logging in on the web and getting something set up there, you've already got your account logged in, and no worries if you're not in the correct school account or anything like that. I can certainly help clean that up afterwards, but I think it'll be useful that if you want to poke through the app along with me, that you can see some of this and understand where the components are. And I will go ahead and preface that, if you are on Android, you will notice some slight differences. This is my iPhone that's plugged in that I like to use for the demos. Android, the development was started a little bit later. We obviously started with iOS, Apple products, and the DJI hardware. But in the coming months, that is going to be drastically changing. And maybe we can get into more of those details toward the end. But to cover the airspace map here, this one's a little more interactive, a little more friendly to use. To point some of this out, we do have our layers up in the top right. So the top portion here are going to be all our safety layers. If you ever need a legend or you see some colors on the map and maybe students ask questions or you don't quite remember what that signifies, we can always open up these layers to get a little bit more information on them. Now towards the bottom, you'll see some map styles. I do like to point it out. Depending on what you're doing with the drones, some clients prefer this street view, while I'll say the majority prefer this satellite view. But for our discussion today, I'm going to flip it to the street view. I think it's a little more visually easier to see what's going on with some of the airspace as we start breaking this down.
Sure.
So here on our airspace map, currently it is showing my location. And apologies, K Shoden, do you mind muting that microphone?
I thought it was muted. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. So it's showing our current location, and if I hop back to the main screen, you'll see we're kind of locked into that. So if I head back to the map here, we can now search. If I tap the little magnifying glass in the corner, we can search for an address. We can put in a latitude, longitude coordinate. We can search airport designations. So it's pretty flexible, but this allows us to kind of search the area. Maybe we're not flying where we're standing, but we're getting ready in the morning, or we're going to head out later tomorrow, and we just want to explore and understand. So in this area, you can see I can start tapping around. And along the bottom, it will load, this is our advisory button here, letting us know that there is one advisory. So if I tap to my current location, misclick, but close enough, you'll see it switches to a green advisory button showing 0 advisories. So we are currently in uncontrolled airspace, and this is indicating that we're good to go, that we're clear to take off. No, authorizations or anything needed. And if I hop back to that previous example where it gave us that yellow 1, okay, we have an advisory, we want to learn more about it. We can actually click this yellow button or drag up on this drawer. And if I do that, you'll see it will break down all the different airspace layers that are going to affect us at that location. So currently this is just showing us a stadium here. And if I tap into the controlled airspace here, you'll see that the advisory button turns blue. Now you can see it is giving us an airport designation. This is KRDU, Raleigh-Durham International. It is Class Charlie controlled airspace, and it's giving us 2 advisories. So we can tap on that and see that, yes, we are inside Class C airspace. And this top card is letting us know that this airport is LANC enabled. And so we can get that instant approval to fly in that controlled airspace. And you'll see right here, it's showing us permissible altitude for 400 feet. So that means we could get instant approval to fly at the particular grid box I dropped that pin in at 400 feet. So these colors indicate the different layers, the different levels that we could get pre-approved, and you'll see as we get closer to the actual runway, that altitude drops. So as a general rule, this is not always true, but generally speaking, this green is going to be 400, the lime green 3, down to yellow 2, orange 1, red 0. Now, the 0 areas, if any of you run into these, might be a little bit difficult if you have not already gotten COAs or certificates of authorization. Now, I believe from the last session, a few of you that were mainly affected by these had already pursued them. You can get approval to fly in areas like this through the LANC system, but instead of being instantaneous, they call it further coordination, which is a manual review process from the FAA and the controlling tower to approve that flight. So it's going to take a little longer than about a minute that it takes to get through LANC. They require at least a 48-hour heads up on these. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes it takes weeks. It really depends on how busy the airspace is, how often they check the system. But the FAA does say they strive to address them in 30 days. So if you're able to plan for flights in very controlled airspace like this, the more time we can give them, usually for the better.
Hey,
So,
Kevin?
Yeah.
Also, one of the things that we've done, that's the reason why we have an operations manual that defines what type of flights we're going to be having and all the restrictions that are required. by providing the first thing people ask you for is what are you planning to do and how are you planning to do it. So now the operations manuals clearly defines all the things that we're doing and they understand it. And they feel much more comfortable at writing. You can get them to give you a long-term permission to fly. That's what some of our schools have done. They get some type of memorandum of understanding, MOU, between the school and the entity. We've had that happen with the military because sometimes our schools are located in an area that are in the military flight zones. But since we're not flying above a certain altitude, the things that we're doing is very confined. That's the key is clearly defining what you're doing. And then with them understanding that, they feel more comfortable about it. So that's the reason why you feel free to use your, get your directors to talk to set up a meeting with the local people that would be the restricting agencies. This is not for the ones that you can get approval on your own. If you can get approval on your own through this app, there's no reason for communicating with anybody. It's for the ones that you cannot get communication. It's going to take you days, as Kevin's saying, days to get approval, and you still might not get that approval. You don't know for sure.
Exactly.
If you're going to be doing something on a regular basis at your school, you want to have something in writing that will allow you that opportunity to do it, and whatever restrictions they want to put upon you, you're more than happy to do. You understand? That's important. So I just want to interject that we do the operations manual. The purpose for it to show that we use KittyHawk to do our flight planning and all. So if we do a flight plan, that we do have the information of what we're doing, and they can monitor that at any time that's asked for the information, and we have it. I think showing that the level of security, protection, and safety that we're doing, a lot of people are more likely to provide us that ability to offer these programs. If we're using the NIF standard, we don't really need to go more than 25 feet in the air. So in that case, there's no reason for us flying 300-400 feet in the air. The people will feel much more comfortable that they're not going to interfere with any air traffic if you're within that air period. There's always that possibility of a flyaway, we understand, but that would be very rare. Okay?
Yeah, perfect. So if you do run into tricky airspace, there is usually a path forward. There are certain rare circumstances where it's absolutely impossible to get authorization. And, as David mentioned, there are some resources out there for that if you run into it. So I was clicking around there as David was talking, and especially as we brought up, I know there is some tricky airspace here in North Carolina. Specifically, this is pulling up Fort Bragg, Pope Air Force Base, with this controlled military airspace there, restricted, I should say. And as you can see, the advisory button turns red, trying to draw your attention towards that. And we also have some of that tricky military airspace out on the coast as well. So it does exist. You will run into it, and the airspace map here is to help you understand, what does this airspace, what does this restriction mean? Can I get authorization? Who do I have to contact? And for the most part, that's built right in. So just as an example here, if I go back to the Fort Bragg example, I'll open my advisories, and you can see we have the ability to open these cards with additional detail. And in most cases, there are even contact names and numbers listed under those areas. So this you can tell because the colorful grid is missing like that, but it does not mean that it's impossible to get authorization. So
Kevin, one other thing I will just let them know that prior to approving your programs, when the director calls me and asks me about, hey, I'm interested in putting somebody in to offer a drone course, the first thing I do is I check the airspace, because I want to know whether they're going to have problems flying or not. That doesn't mean they can't do it, but I'll let them know that they don't have any problems flying. They should be good to go. Or I'll say, well, you know, you're going to have to get approval for that. So you may want to verify that before you spend any time and money in putting in a program. Some people did not, we did not do this early on, and we had some issues again like that. And some of them decided this is what we want to do, and they did it anyway. So that's, you know, that's again, I can't tell them they can't have one, but I can tell them what issues they have to do because they have to follow the law. So just to let you know that prior to implementing a program, I do track on my chart, and we're going to show you that chart today at 1 o'clock, all the programs that are being worked on right now. And one of my categories is I asked about the airspace. So I do put in the airspace, whether it's flyable or not, or restricted or not. And, you know, that because we run the program, right? So all of your programs are in my system, right? KittyHawk has one system. So we are one system, and that's what we have to do. So just to let you know that, you know, we are monitoring for you also. And so if you have any questions about that, feel free to, you know, call me and we can look it up for you also.
Excellent. It's great to have a resource like that, David. That's extremely useful. So a couple more details on this airspace map. I'm going to pick some interesting airspace here. So I just dropped my pin that's kind of southeast corner of RDU. And again, it turns blue. It does let us know. So this grid is only up to 300 feet for instant authorization. We'll see that we are within that Class Charlie, Class C airspace. And we are also nearby a stadium. So if I open up like the stadium card, you know, obviously things are a little different these days, but you know, any events that would attract crowds, sporting events, concerts, farmers markets, you know, things like that that could be attracted to these areas. We just want to double check for that type of activity. It would essentially turn this TFR on and make it active, which would affect whether or not we have the ability to fly here. So it's hard to account for every stadium's activity, which is why that if you do run into that airspace, it's worth a quick double check to make sure there's nothing going on at the stadium. Then the last piece I'd like to point out is while we're checking the airspace at this location, I can also switch this card over and get some information on the weather. You might notice that this was the same information that was on the main screen, and for good reason, but this particular area will update the weather as we start to explore the map. So again, the airspace map can be used to explore airspace outside our current location. And if we use the map, we can also double check weather at that location. And for the rest of that example, I'm going to back out to the home screen here and we could talk about weather for a minute. So just under the airspace, obviously just as important as the legal, you know, can I take off at this location? There are some weather minimums, both legal and safety, that come into play here. Now there's going to be certain things you'll learn during the 107, like cloud ceilings and visibility, that we want to make sure that we're in compliance with. And then when I mentioned safety, you know, depending on the type of drone that we're flying, drones can only handle so much wind, you know, before they're just a leaf, you know, being blown along. The smaller drones, you know, some of them are really just ideal for indoors, some of the smaller Telos or Airs, things like that. And let's say the larger Mavics, slightly larger Mavics and the Phantoms, some of those DJI models, let's say maybe 15 to 20 miles an hour winds. And then we get into some of the larger aircraft that can handle 25 plus mile per hour winds, you know, up to large ones they use in offshore, you know, oil platforms and things like that that have to deal with the weather and the wind out there. So that piece is going to be tied to the capabilities of the drone. The other minimums I mentioned, the visibility and things like that, are going to be tied to you as a Part 107 operator. Those are things that we agreed to when we went out and got certified as a drone pilot. But simple briefing here on the weather. You know, we get all the standard information we'd want. We have our temperature, winds and gusts, how fast we could expect it to get to. Here's our visibility. We actually have 10-mile visibility. It's blue skies and clear where I am, but you can see it's that morning fog advisory that's lifting. So as the sun comes out, that fog advisory will clear up. 87% in humidity here in North Carolina, about on par. There's the cloud cover I mentioned, and it's giving us the cloud ceiling here. So if we were to fly at 400 feet, and the minimum distance for cloud ceiling is 500 foot vertically, we could fly all the way to 400 feet right now because the lowest cloud ceiling is over 900 feet. And we do mark daylight, sunset time here, so we know when we need to make sure that drone comes home. And lastly, we have the GPS signal. So I'm inside right now. It's not looking so great, but that gives you an idea of, is my location data going to be accurate while I'm out flying? So just like we pointed out the airspace screen and how we could dig into more detail, we can do the same on the weather as well. So down here under flight deck, you'll see we also have the forecast tab. And I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And this is going to give us a much more detailed breakdown of the weather. So this screen is giving us an hourly breakdown of the conditions. So we can see, is it improving? Is it getting worse? You can see we clearly mark sunset again. So there's civil twilight. So there's the last minute that, that drone flight log better end at that time, unless we're using a night waiver, something like that. So we want to make sure that's very clear. Let's say the conditions weren't the greatest today. Up at the top, we can actually fast forward through the rest of the week. So if I start tapping on those, you'll see we can check out, what the weather tomorrow is going to bring. And lastly, this one is often overlooked, this by height tab, which I can tap on, and it'll actually break down the current conditions at altitude so we can see, what are those winds aloft doing at 400 feet compared to on the ground. Sometimes, okay, so 2 to 6 miles per hour, not a huge difference. Sometimes they can be drastically different. So that's kind of the airspace. Oh, one thing I did want to point out, excuse me. So this top map here on the weather forecast, you'll see it looks like the airspace map, but this is also, you could kind of think of it like the Doppler radar screen on like weather.com, something like that, where if there is precipitation or some sort of weather events, cloud cover, that will start to get colorized, the blues, the purples, to let you know the different cells and severity of that weather. So I'm going to go through the rest of the pieces of the flight deck. Again, just so we have the context of what some of the different features are. So air traffic, this is actually something we introduced a couple years ago. If some of you are following the current trends, you could think of remote ID. This was kind of the initial version of MVP, initial version of remote ID before it was really starting to be pushed. So this is anonymized drone data. Might be a little early, but you can see we have some activity starting up in the Northeast. Looks like maybe a training class. You can see there's a bunch of pins there indicating lots of takeoff and landing. So, you could imagine this is what your groups might look like if you're doing flying one day with multiple students, multiple drones, multiple takeoffs and landings. You'll see a similar type of setup here. And basically there is a delay before these icons drop off the map so that we have that kind of situational awareness that if it's just one pin somewhere by itself, it's just one pilot flying. But some activity like that popping up on the map indicates that if I was flying nearby, I might want to avoid that group because maybe it's a bunch of new pilots or maybe it's, public safety, emergency response, something like that going on. But you could see how useful this information would be as we're getting ready to go fly and making sure there's not going to be a ton of activity around us. Now you could imagine, North Carolina, I tend to see these every now and then. You'll, for the most part, probably be spaced out far enough, but we can always double check through maps like this. And just so you know, that pilots, KittyHawk users have to opt in to sharing this information. It's not something we require. That isn't until the regulations become a little bit more real with remote ID and it becomes more of a requirement. So Paul asked, does this recognize all drones with GPS or only those tied into KittyHawk? That is a good question. This is just those that want to share their information on the KittyHawk platform. Now, what you're getting at with, that's kind of where remote ID is going to come into play. So remote ID is going to be the overarching system from the FAA where service providers like KittyHawk can plug into this system just like Lance, and we'll be able to get a better situational awareness picture of all the drones across the United States. So whether you're flying in KittyHawk or maybe some unsupported software or drone by itself that's equipped with a piece of hardware or other software like an air map or something like that, a drone sense, all those providers will get connected to the server and we'll have a much better picture of that drone activity, that much better picture of 400 feet and below. And I think that's, you know, there's still some things that remain to be seen with what those regulations will look like. But I think the path they're trying to find is how can we provide enough information so that, you know, we know that the drone that's flying over our house, you know, isn't some pesky neighbor and it's actually an insurance company that's taking pictures of my neighbor's roof, but without exposing too much personal information like, you know, their name and their phone number and address and things like that. So I think it still remains to be seen. But there's going to be some clever solutions out there, and KittyHawk is certainly going to be part of that remote ID solution. So, Paul, this is limited to KittyHawk, but in the near future, I'll say we're probably 4 years or so out from seeing real regulations on that, but it's certainly coming. One thing to point out for you is this internal traffic view. So we can actually switch this over. So if we were flying with a group or with our students, we could keep an eye, you know, obviously we would be a little bit more zoomed in. This is more useful for, let's say, admins or chief pilots that are following their team kind of flying out in the field as they deploy in real time. But I wanted to point that out because you guys might find that useful as well. So last couple of cards here, we do have this online mode. And this kind of has two parts to it. The first one, you know, we could flip this offline and you can see it says activity syncs locally. So what we're doing, the first part is really security related. As I mentioned earlier in the call, we have a very strong security stance when it comes to your data and especially flying the DJI hardware. If you haven't been following, you know, for the last couple of years, DJI has taken a lot of flack from the likes of Department of Defense, Homeland Security, Department of Interior, because after inspecting these drones and their software, it was determined that there were foreign IP connections and essentially data channels going straight back to China, which caused a lot of concern for these government groups that are flying, you know, critical infrastructure and you know, things that have a national security importance. So it was quickly published in the news that they grounded all these drones from flying on those locations. And you know, so if I take a second to pause there, KittyHawk itself acts as a firewall or security wrapper for the DJI hardware. We step in front of their software. So we can wrap up that hardware, keep your data local within KittyHawk. This is just an extra level that will keep the data local on your phone. It will keep it from trying to, it will keep it from trying to send any information to the cloud. And then we can have a little bit more control over when we do that. Let's say we get back on our secure Wi-Fi or secure, you know, data connection, LTE, whatever. Then we can flip it online. and all our activity will show below here. And then we can just tap sync to push all that stuff onto the KittyHawk cloud. So first part is strictly security, but a second benefit of this is for those of you that fly in very rural or remote areas, maybe you're in a valley or just a dead zone with no cell connection, this also acts as a literal offline mode. So if we are in zero internet connection areas, we can flip it offline, which prevents the app from, looking for some of those updates because we're constantly trying to update the airspace, the weather, pilot information as we move through the different components of the platform. So to prevent any bad information from getting attached to your flight logs or anything like that, we can flip this offline, fly, capture all our activity, and then when we upload it to the web, the airspace, the weather, all those details will get uploaded at that point instead of trying to do it from the app when we're offline. So I'm going to make sure that is online for the rest of our example, and we can back out. And then the last card here you'll see is streaming. We certainly support streaming built into the KittyHawk platform. This may or may not be useful for certain groups. I think if we're dealing with new pilots, we're most likely going to be a little bit more involved, a little bit more eyes over the shoulder, keeping an eye on the hands on the sticks, but certainly a tool that would be at your disposal if you want to use it or show it off, or give some examples of how streaming can be used. Obviously, it's huge with public safety. Think local police departments and firefighters, hurricane response with like NCDOT. Streaming is very huge in those types of situations as well. So it is available, but this card here is where we could go in to view a stream from the mobile app. So this is a view section, whereas if we wanted to broadcast or start a stream from our device, we would do that in that very first card that I skipped over, where it says prepare for flight and configure. And you'll see in a little bit when we fire up the drone and we get to that point that this is where it'll show us, connected to aircraft. Let me get those pop-ups to go away. And then this configure button will switch to go fly. So we do fly within the KittyHawk platform to help maintain that security stance. And doing so, we can offer some value add functionality like streaming with audio, so we can actually communicate back and forth as well. And then lastly, I saved this DJI status for last because this is the integration where you can enter your DJI username and password, and we can import all of your previous flight logs, if you have them, into the KittyHawk platform. This is a one-way street, so nothing goes back the other way. It's just to bring those flight logs over, and that's it. So that way we can at least account for your hours in the system itself. So this configure section, I'm going to show you what it looks like, but then again, as I mentioned before, we're going to circle back to this once we get to the workflow. So Paul, I believe you were the one that answered this, asked this question earlier regarding the live traffic. So this is where we can set that preference. Are we comfortable sharing this with everyone on the KittyHawk platform and our potential partners as we work to develop remote ID? Or is this something that maybe we want to keep it internal to our team, our account only? So our flight profile, this is where we can go in and edit things like return to home altitude, what happens if my drone loses connection with the controller, and some of those kind of safety settings to double check before you launch. Obviously if we're flying near trees, around here, I think about 125 feet is safe for me with the height of the trees. So we want to make sure that the return to home altitude will clear those trees. So if we get into an emergency situation, the drone doesn't return, straight into the woods or something like that. So worth taking a look at those settings. We do have some minimal automated flights here, and towards the end, I might share a little bit more information on what's to come. because we are actually working on a new enterprise platform that'll be coming out a little bit later this year. So I don't want to go too much into that because this is going to have all the tools and all the functionality to get you started. And we can have a more detailed conversation on the platform, once it's a little bit more commercially ready. So the last two sections here, I'd like to point out, I did mention the other section was to view streams. So this is where we get ready to fly. And this is where we can enable broadcast flight to stream out from our drone. So once we enable this and we connect our drone and go fly, someone could then view our stream either in the iOS app or in the mobile dashboard as well. And then there's going to be some links down here, and we will circle back to these again as we get to the workflow and piecing all these different things together. Now, beyond that, the rest of the mobile application is fairly self-explanatory. So along the bottom here, if I go through activity, you'll see this is just my historical activity of everything I've done on the platform. We have our mission section, any flight imports, checklists, risk assessments, all that good stuff. So if we needed to review any of our activity, we could go back and check here. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. Don, if you can hear me, do you mind muting? Thank you, sir. So beyond the historical activity here, I'm going to skip over the middle one. The assets, it's going to show what has been loaded onto our account. Now, this can be controlled by our admins. We can limit, what pilots have visibility to see what aircraft and batteries and checklists, depending on their skill level or competency, anything like that. We as admins can kind of build up these walls within the account with permissions and the assignment of assets. That's going to come a little bit towards the end. So this is just where we can go in and see, oh, here's my aircraft. Let me open up, here's my Mavic that's sitting on my desk here. You'll see we have our registration and expiration information in here. We have all our serial numbers. Worth pointing out that there is the external serial number that's on the sticker on the drone. And then there's actually an internal serial number that we can't access without some sort of software like DJI or KittyHawk, something that connects to that flight controller, which is, what's giving the drone its commands to fly. And then down to firmware, some other details and some stats based on our activity. And then useful is this last recorded location. So I believe that has helped a few people, and David hinted at some flyaways before. That has helped people, get to a closer location to locate a potential flyaway. Or perhaps for admins, who did I assign this drone to again? They could pull up that location and double check, what location or department it's been assigned to. And there's some other ways for that as well. And then the last section here is the profile. So, for those of you that might be following along, or those that are maybe downloading the KittyHawk app now, this is usually the first step that I would point you to, is once you get the application installed, head over to your profile, open up your operator profile, and double check that you've finished out your phone number and verified it, and then enter your Part 107 registration and issue date, which will calculate expiration. Now, this is bad example here. This is actually my admin account for KittyHawk versus my my private one that's got my real information. So that is not my 107 number. You can glance over that, but definitely everyone, please feel free at this point to go ahead and complete this information, because this will need your phone number verified. We'll need this set up as we get into the Lance system. So to file Lance as a Part 107 operator, we do require that this information is there, because it does get included and is shared with the FAA when we file those requests. So although also worth pointing out here, some of our accounts and preferences. So maybe this only affects David. There might be some of you in multiple accounts. You are able to register a personal account as well. So sometimes you might switch between your private personal account versus your, you know, a little bit more commercial, you know, where we want to split the difference in the flight logs. And then we do have some preferences on here with whether it's our map styles, Touch ID. So for a two-factor, you know, biometric scan, fingerprint, Touch ID, Face ID, etc. We can do some different, you know, Celsius, Fahrenheit, miles, kilometers, things like that. So you're probably good with the settings as is, but worth pointing out because that is a question I receive pretty frequently. And the last thing on the app that I kind of want to unpack a little bit is that add button in the bottom center. So if I tap on that, this is where we start to get into this workflow conversation. So we're going to go through some of the best practices in a bit, and I'm going to wrap this up. We'll say 5 minutes, and then maybe I'll give you guys a little break. Maybe I'll shoot for that every hour. We'll give like a 5-10 minute break. So I'll leave it with this, where this add button gives us access to each of the components of the workflow in KittyHawk. So you can see we have the idea to create the mission. And I'll repeat this, but the mission in KittyHawk is essentially just a new file folder on your computer, you know, an empty bucket that we can then start adding our flight information into. The rest of this activity that we're looking at, you know, such as running our risk assessments, logging our checklists, requesting those LANC authorizations, that approval to fly in controlled airspace. And then we even have the ability to log flights manually. So this would be, you know, if we're flying an unsupported aircraft, we could either do it field by field manually, entering all the information, or what I typically recommend for situations like that is we also have a flight timer built in. And I'll use these as examples once we get into the workflow as well, but I just wanted to surface that to give you guys a little context as to what we're about to jump into. So I'll say we'll go ahead and call about a 5-10 minute break. For those of you, if you do have access to your Part 107 information during this break, if you want to go ahead and fill that out and get it verified so you can follow along with both the mission process and the LANC process when we get to it, that would be great. And I'll stick around, so if anyone has any questions or anything like that, feel free to jump in and ask them, but I'll call, go ahead and feel free to take a 5 to 10 minute break, and we'll get started again, let's say 35 after the hour, just to shoot for there.
And if you guys need anything from me, I'm still here. Unfortunately, I am, of course, bouncing back between 3 or 4 different things. So I'm not necessarily 100% paying attention to this particular, unfortunately, because this is the one I want to be with, but obviously my duties require me to do other things at the same time. So Wayne Bailey is on here. He's monitoring it also. So if anything comes up, I am watching the chat window if it comes up. And again, please feel free to text me on my cell phone at 919-524-7834. 919-524-7834. I am monitoring that. So thankful to me that the sessions are being recorded, and so we will be able to view them later. I'm relying upon that for my own personal use. So please feel free. Again, according to Kevin, we will be starting back at 9:35.
There you go.
So how do I?
Please make sure you maintain your mute.
Oh, hey, Autumn, I just saw the hand go up.
Hi, I came in a little late, so were there resources I was supposed to download or information I should be able to access?
So the main thing that David had shared was the operations manual. So there is a file that's attached that kind of explains the process as a whole. Now,
Okay.
if you'd like to follow along, you can go ahead and download the KittyHawk application on your phone. We are on the Android and the Play Store, the Play Store and the Apple Store. So you can go ahead and do that. What I was just recommending at the end there was to download and go ahead and complete our operator profile with phone number and Part 107 details.
Okay, so we're downloading that to our phone, not to our PC. Okay.
Correct. So if you missed the first couple seconds, what I explained here, this is my iPhone, this window here on the left-hand side.
Yes.
And then on the right-hand side, this is a web browser. This is Chrome.
Yes.
And this is just, you can get to this through the KittyHawk website, or you can go straight to that app.kittyhawk.io.
Okay. All right, and I can download that, and I should be filling out which document again?
So in the application,
Yeah.
once you download it, if you head over to Profile,
Yeah.
and then Operator Profile, you'll see all these details that we're looking at here.
Okay, then I'll fill that out. All right, thank you.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I have a question. It's Part 107 study. Is that the app?
So the app name is KittyHawk. So if you're looking to download it, if I back out to my home screen here, you'll see KittyHawk is what we're going to search for.
With the green, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess the logo helps with that. Hey, Wayne, I saw your name pop up when you unmuted, but yeah, didn't get a chance to say hi before.
Just saying good morning. How you doing? Just to let you know I was here.
Yeah, doing great. Hope you are.
Yes, sir. I'm enjoying the presentation.
I try to live up to expectations.
You know, and it's good is that to be able to go back and do some reviewing. And I am interested in the enterprise. So I just sent a note in just to say, hey, contact me, let me know, and talk about special live streaming for public safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the last few weeks, I've been helping many departments either, troubleshoot or get started or, work out some of the kinks. So definitely a major interest there.
Right. And I volunteer for Skyland Fire Department and Broad River Fire Department as well. So there's always a need to be able to send somebody a live video of what's going on, whether it's a river search or things might be happening directly downtown, whatever the case is. Sometimes people want to be able to have it. We've even had a search where here in Asheville where they wanted it at the Emergency Operations Center in Raleigh.
Yeah, very familiar. I actually have family that work at the ECC in Raleigh. And yeah, no, huge use case there, sending it back to either an ECC type building or mobile command. So I don't want to go into too much detail here and throw anyone off. But certainly, I mentioned earlier in the call that we've been developing a new application for enterprise use. And you'll see this application with the identical logo, different colors, black and white here. Air Control
Right.
is going to be our new enterprise platform.
Nice.
And especially when it comes to streaming, there's some enhancements. So, better latency, crisper visuals, but huge for public safety is we can now start a stream even from our mobile device. So even prior to getting a drone launched, we can start getting that feed back to, mobile command or the decision makers.
Right. Using just your phone, camera, video.
Absolutely.
Nice.
It's not, no link sharing, not Facebook, not YouTube. It's encrypted end to end, and we still have the audio as well. So you can communicate, whether you're flying as a pilot or you do it through the mobile, you can actually communicate back and forth, still encrypted as well. And that way, it's less texting, calling, especially if there's a pilot flying or something like that.
Right. And we're just talking offline here, and it's okay if anybody else is listening, but with the high schools, I don't know that they would ever be doing any live streaming, but they probably need to know that they have access to it. Part of NFPA 2400 UAS for the public safety, we talk about that in that curriculum, that they need to have some ability to be able to stream and it be secured, you know, going back to whoever and have permission set up to how to be able to do that. Sometimes Facebook or YouTube is not so secure and the quality is not the best as well.
Yeah, and exactly. And unless you 100% know what you're doing with those settings, it's very easy that you miss one, and that link can become public. And
Right.
you know, as you mentioned, you'll experience 20 to 30-second latency. And so, you know, with our system, right here on the desk on Wi-Fi with everything connected, I still get about 3-second latency. But if
Right.
I'm on my, you know, connected to my mobile, that's on my, that's on the Verizon network, and if that's all that I'm doing, you can get sub-second, so under a second latency. And so with that audio, you know, it makes it a little bit more useful. If you imagine 20, 30-second delay, you know, telling a pilot, you know, pan right, stop. That
Understand.
20, 30 seconds, yeah, that drone's going to spin all the way around by the time they hear it. So, yeah, definitely get a lot of good feedback on that.
It's good to know.
Hey, Kevin, a quick question. This is Paul here. I didn't see in the beginning of your presentation, nor did I see on the organization that's running this, your email address, but I noticed it was put up there when you were going through your different cards. I don't know if that's your personal email address or one that we can use to contact you.
So if you'd like to shoot me an email directly, you can send it to Kevin, Kevin, at kittyhawk.io. So if I can type that up here. And then, of course, we also have our support line.
All right.
So if you're just, you know, general questions, or you need some help, or you're looking for, you know, FAQs or documents,
Right.
feel free to reach out through that address as well. You know, basically more people monitor the support channel so you can get an answer back quicker.
Because one of the things I was going to ask is, I noticed on the computer website site for KittyHawk, for our school system, you have one of our high schools listed in the drop-down menu. I'm in a different one. If I were to put this information in the app right now, which I can't because my school, I just realized my school iPad is 100% dead and I'm trying to get it charged up. Should I wait until there is a drop-down menu for my high school, or will it be very easy to transfer it over if it's attached to a different high school at this point?
Gotcha. Easy to transfer over. Don't, you know, your operator profile is tied to your email login.
Gotcha.
So if you go ahead and fill it out, and yeah, so for that, if you want to go ahead and send an email to me with the correct school that you should be associated with, I'll be glad to help correct that.
Perfect. And I'll get rid of that other email that I saw written up there, which is probably your personal email.
Yeah, that Gmail is my personal.
Okay.
You know, that tends to fill up with spam a lot. So that
I
if you
understand.
need something, yeah, might not be the best one.
Kevin?
Okay, so let me say to you, it's now 9:37, so we're starting back. Hopefully everybody's gathered back. I would say that if you do not have your account for your school, if you cannot see an account for your school, you need to email me. I will forward the information to Kevin. If you want to email Kevin through his KittyHawk software, you can. But again, I won't know to follow up if you don't include me. So anytime you communicate with KittyHawk, if you would make sure you include me, I can follow up and make sure that it's there. All of it falls under my account anyway, because like I said, I have multiple accounts. I can see everybody's stuff. So if your school is not in there and you are running a drone program, if you're planning to run one in the future, we'll still go ahead and we can still put you in, but understand only 107 pilots are entered into the pilots. None of your students that are not 107 pilots are entered into the system. I don't know. We haven't covered that yet, have we, Kevin?
No, we have not. We'll
Okay.
cover that
All right.
probably
That's
towards the
fine.
end of
I
the
don't want to.
workflow here. But
Yeah, okay. I don't want to jump ahead, but I'm just simply saying the only ones that we need is if you're a 107 certified pilot, if you're a teacher and you're not 107 certified, you don't need to be teaching the class. I'm being about as blunt as I can be. If you are teaching the class without 107 certification, you fly a drone inside or outside, you're breaking the law. All right. The law requires in North Carolina that if you fly for a government entity in any way, you have to be at least NCDOT operator permitted. And if you fly outside, you have to be 107 certified. You have to be. That is a federal and state law. So if you're teaching this class and you're not 107 certified, you need to correct that issue as soon as possible. Could you teach the 107 certification without being certified? You can, but you cannot fly drones in any capacity. So you need to have that and take care of that. Okay, there's plenty of ways of doing it. There's all kinds of online classes you can take to prepare you for it. So there's no reason, I don't want to get off on that tangent, but simply saying that the only ones that need to be entered into this system are those who are certified. But if you do not have an account, being that if you don't have a school account, please let me know, copy me, copy Kevin, whoever, send it to me, copy Kevin, whoever. We need to make sure that we get you in the system because every school has to have this system. It is required as part of our program. Okay? I think I'll turn it back over to Kevin then.
excellent. Thank you, David. And so as we push forward with this, if you guys are still following along, I realize it might be hard to switch screens and still follow. So I'll give you some examples, but feel free to follow along if you can, if you've got dual monitors or anything like that, as we push forward with this workflow. So where we kind of left off was this add button in the bottom center of the application. So at this point, I kind of broke down all the different features of the mobile app. Now I'm going to dive into this workflow, and we're going to do a bit more jumping back and forth between the app on the left and the web on the right. This is where I can really point out some of those parallels between the two platforms. And then let's say towards the end, maybe right before Q&A, we'll dive into some of the features that are only available on the web. So jumping into the workflow, everything in KittyHawk, if we want to do it properly, revolves around the idea of a mission. And I mentioned it before, I'll say it again, the mission in KittyHawk is really like creating a new folder on your desktop computer, or a new manila folder that we're putting all our files in. It's the central pin that's going to hold all of our flight data, our authorizations, our airspace, weather, drone, batteries. That's going to hold all of our activity for the reason we were flying that day. So you can think of create mission. This is the objective as to what we're going out to do, and so this may look different, and you are free. The workflow is completely flexible, so you're without deviating from the operations manual that David is sharing with you. There is some flexibility in terms of maybe the naming scheme, or some of the flight notes, which we're going to get into. There are some requirements, but some of these sections are also flexible as well. And now, David, before I put my foot in my mouth on that one, do you have any guidance for how you would like the missions named? Whether we're doing it per semester, per day of flying?
We currently don't have a, I guess, a nomenclature for that. I would say that we could decide that right now if we wanted to. Since each school will be its own school, I would say that you would probably want to put in, I would think you would probably put in the teacher's name, the semester. Well, it's got a date on it, so we don't need to know the date. The date is on it, right? Correct, Kevin?
Correct.
So we don't need to know the date, but you would need to put in the teacher's name and the block, whether it's first, second, third, or fourth block, or period if you're doing a, if you have a traditional schedule. And then you would need to know if you have, if you're going to have everybody in the same mission plan, which is typically what you would do if you're teaching the class, then you don't have to do anything but just list it that way. But if you're doing multiple plans for different students, then you would put in, if you're doing something different, you'd have to create different ones and put the students' initials or something on it so you know. But in most cases, it's going to be probably your name and the period, the block number that you're doing it, because the date would already be on there. I think that would be, well, you have to have a date. So probably, I'm thinking ahead, but I've got a problem on the video I'm trying to fix right now on another session.
Oh, sure.
People loaded in an MV, a different format. There's got to be an MP4 file, so they can't see the video. So I've got to convert it and put it back on there. But anyway, what I'm telling you is you put in the nomenclature should be the teacher's name, the block number, and the date. Put that in there because the date would show up as the date, but it would not necessarily be part of the, is that correct? It wouldn't be part of the title. Isn't that correct?
Right. So is the date more useful, or is the semester like fall 2020?
No, just the date. That's okay. The date, because we would need to know the date that they're flying, right? So I would say, because we're looking for an issue, because that's the objective, right? To be able to go back and find if there was an issue, we need to know the date. So specify the, somebody from Goldsboro calling you. How about that?
Yeah.
That's right down the road. I would say just make sure you have the teacher's name, the block number, and the date, right? Now, and if you're going to have more than one flight, you would need to define it in some way. Flight 1, flight 2, flight 3, whatever. But just do it that way. Teacher's name, and we'll make sure that I'll make a note of this. Flight log. I'm going to make a note so that we can make sure that we cover this in some type of a flight log is going to be, I'm going to say teacher name. I've got this done. We're going to put block, and then we're going to put date. And then it would be 1, 2, 3, whatever. Does that make sense to everybody? Anybody have any questions about that? Does that make sense, Kevin?
Yes, it does. And I'll give that visual here in a sec when we get to it.
Okay. And that's what we'll do. That makes it easy. Everybody's the same. So if I go looking for information, I can find the flight logs for everybody.
Excellent. Yeah, and the naming scheme, before I actually, let me close out of that, before I actually create that mission. So where this comes into play, so if I focus on the website here on the right, you'll see these are examples from working with customers, different use cases. Up at the top, let's say this is more of a survey group versus emergency flights. Here's an inspection example, search and rescue with a case number for public safety. Where this comes into place is we could have our, certain locations built into our mission name, certain asset numbers or case numbers, or basically what we're doing is creating a naming scheme that we can stick with. And what this allows us to do is by keeping this consistent, by sticking to that naming scheme, we can then, come back at any time and, show me all my inspection missions, and we can use, whatever abbreviation or whatever number we use to signify inspection. Then you can see here, we can filter out all our different inspection type missions, or for instance, if we did an asset number or an address or something like that, it will pull up missions associated with that specific location. So depending on how we set this naming scheme up, the way David was just describing, this will allow us to kind of pull up information for our students at any given time. It's a little more organized, so if we do have to visit it 6 months, a year down the road, it's a little bit more easy to find. So I want to show you how it was actionable before we started to create one. So hopping back on the mobile app here, we're going to go ahead and create this mission. And you'll see we capture a lot of information automatically, and we will try, to streamline and automate as much of the process as we can. if we can make a 5-step process 3 steps, that's the kind of efficiency we're looking to gain here. So just by creating the mission, you'll see it kind of automatically gets assigned this requested status. Now, keep in mind, we do have clients that use this that have full-time program administrators running their drone program. So those that are directly involved in day-to-day operations, double checking pilot airspace, making sure they got LANC approvals, making sure they're attaching the right authorizations and documents, then approving that mission internally. As you can see here on the right-hand side, this blue status is indicating requested. The red is letting us know that that mission has been completed. And we do have a few other options in between. Now, for the most part, you'll probably just be updating it until to completed at the end of the day, unless you have some sort of ongoing project or situation where, we'll add some more flight time, then come back and close it out. Just by creating the mission, we automatically set ourselves an hour from the current time. And that's adjustable. So again, this is very flexible. We can make it all day long. We can make it span multiple days if we have an ongoing project. We could even, technically have it last all semester if that was something that would, simplify our recording procedures without inundating us with too much detail in the system. So again, we want to make this useful and easy to find what we're looking for. And through, some of the naming schemes and how much data we include, this is going to be a central component. So I really haven't changed the data much at all. It knows who I am from my login. It knows my current GPS location from my mobile phone. And it's also going to associate the closest address as well. So again, with the mission name, I'm going to give an example here. Sticking with what David explained, we can say, I'm just going to use me as an example. So we'll use teacher last name. Let's see, you gave us blocks. So let's just say second block and then the date. So depending on how you want to do that format, maybe I'll do 07/13/2020. And then this note section again is going to be everywhere in the platform. So on the mission itself, on our flights, on our checklists, on the risk assessments, basically every component in KittyHawk is going to have the ability to add notes should we need to, or provide any extra context to what the student was doing, if there was an issue during the flight, where we had trouble, we could throw all that information here. Basically just an open text form that we can use to our liking. So I'm going to go ahead and save that mission. And this is where we'll start jumping back and forth a bit between the app and the web. So if I do a quick refresh here, you can see already our mission has popped up on the web dashboard. And bear with me, I'll try to make this a little bigger. Can I go one more? A little too much. Okay, so here's our mission right up top here. And if I open it up, we didn't do much to the record. All we did basically was give it a name, but you'll see that even by doing so, we're capturing a lot of information about, what this flight mission objective, what this day of flying is going to look like. So we know, most likely it's going to be us as the teacher, as the Part 107 holder, that's going to be the chief pilot. If others have the 107, great. As David said, we could probably get them on the system and they could start recording their own hours. But if they do not, they are essentially flying under your Part 107. So as we get into the flight logs, I'll show you how you can record that for each flight, what student actually had thumbs on the sticks. And then that way, we can reference, their experience, flight time on the platform as well. So we know essentially who is flying. We know, what this objective was, what this data is capturing. We get a quick location. We get our weather details on the right-hand side. This should look pretty familiar to what we looked at in the beginning on the app. And then just below that, we do have our airspace preview as well. So we can even get an idea of what the airspace around us is going to look like here. Worth mentioning, some people prefer the application versus the web and vice versa. There's not an absolute correct way to do it. As I just pointed out, a lot of the features exist in both the app and the mobile and the website. So, you know, no matter what you prefer, we can do the mission planning on either. So if I scroll below the map, you'll see a bunch of different sections here that are just kind of sitting empty. And as we push forward with the workflow, as we start to fly in our examples, this information will start to populate as we work through the details. And if I open that workflow, that add button again on the bottom right, you'll see that these kind of map out with a few exceptions here, but for the most part, these map out to these categories. Okay, so we got the mission set up. Our next step, if we're, you know, getting ready to fly for the day, we want to understand, you know, what are our risks for flying in this current location, in this current environment, area, you know, helping the pilot understand and identify different risk factors that are surrounding them. That is where our risk assessments will come into play. And so if I tap into, let's log a risk assessment, you know, best practice, this is something that a lot of clients start with initially. You know, we want to kind of size up what we're going to be dealing with out in the field. You'll see we have two different kind of flavors here. The initial, you could think of more like a planning risk assessment. So if we ran the risk assessment here on the web, you know, maybe we're an hour from where we plan on flying. I realize that's probably not the case, but just to try to make this clear, let's say we're not quite where we're flying, or maybe it's the day before, a month before, and we're just setting up the flight in advance. We can run an initial risk assessment, which is, you know, we can answer maybe what the airspace is, what some of the details, how populated the area looks, but we're not really going to be we're not going to be able to answer a lot of the situational awareness, you know, the eyes in the field questions until we get out there. And that's where the pre-flight risk assessment comes in, designed more for the pilot standing in the field, getting ready to fly. So for this example, we're going to do the pre-flight. Oh, was there a question there or someone joining? Okay, never mind. So we're going to do the pre-flight example. Again, as the pilot in the field, getting ready to fly. So a couple crucial steps here. The first is, you know, we'll want to link this to the mission, and there's the mission we just created. And the next option, which you can see is optional, so it's okay if we have not added anything to the account yet, is to link it to our aircraft. So this is also going to identify, you know, what aircraft we were using for the mission, for the risk assessment that day. As I mentioned earlier in the call, with certain wind conditions, you know, depending on the size of the aircraft, could be a risk. You know, 15 miles an hour, let's say 20 miles an hour, not a risk for the larger, you know, M200s, M600, the bigger DJI models out there. A Mavic could even handle that, even though it's at its upper limit. But the Telos, the Airs, you know, there's a safety hazard there, because as soon as you let that thing go in the wind, you'll probably never see it again. So there are some implications there as to, you know, what drone I'm flying can affect some of these risk factors. So I'll select my aircraft, and I will circle back on some of the initial setup for those that currently don't have anything in their account. We'll get through the workflow, and then that's where we're going to dive into the web. So that's kind of, first we started with the app. We're going to do some transitional, you know, back and forth with the workflow, and then, you know, we'll focus a little bit more on the web dashboard towards, you know, once we get through this. So it's already pulling our latitude and longitude here as well. And this, along with the timestamp, you know, I kind of hear mixed reactions on it. Some feel like it's a little bit, you know, Big Brother, that we're tracking locations and times of where we were. You know, now keep in mind, the entire KittyHawk platform, you know, is secure. We have a very strong security stance. We don't share, we don't sell, we don't do anything with our clients' data. What this is for, ultimately, is to help back up our safety justification. So if we ever did have to go through an audit, or, you know, management insurance comes in, legal, you know, you get an inquiry from legal, or maybe an FAA inspector comes knocking. We have the ability to then back ourselves up, showing that we do our risk assessments on scene before the flight. You know, we don't do our pre-flight the night before, the month before. We didn't do it the night after because we forgot about it and just attached it. You know, this is really helping show that we identify our risks, we run through our operations manual, we do all of our due diligence before we launch that aircraft into the national airspace system. So as we push forward with the risk assessment here, you'll see it breaks down into 3 different categories. Now, the first one being all about the pilot. So obviously I've logged in with my KittyHawk information, so it can pull some from my profile. As I mentioned, we will try to automate what we can. So it knows my currency and recency information. And some of this should look familiar from the 107. So identifying the pilot's health or the I'm safe procedure, you know, making sure we're not sick and we're on, you know, drowsy medicine or antihistamines, you know, something that could potentially make us mess up on the sticks, you know, just identifying that off at the onset will, you know, help you determine, am I able to fly? Am I not able to fly? Maybe there are other conditions that make it a no and other conditions that make it a yes. And I'll circle back once we get through the risk assessment, I'll explain exactly what I mean there. So beyond the I'm safe, we also have hazardous attitudes. So from the 107, things like resignation, like, oh, you know, there's no hope, or, you know, macho, feeling too confident. You know, oh, that, you know, I don't have to worry about that. That's never going to happen to me. So you can see how these line up with the, you know, Part 107 information, and this is all great detail that is going to help back you up if the FAA or the likes of, you know, management, insurance, legal ever come knocking. And because we're doing risk assessments, we're doing checklists, we're going through all of our due diligence, you know, we'll call this, I'm going to say cursory flight prep, where thorough, I might draw the line. I'll leave that up to you, how you consider it. Thorough, I tend to recommend for those that have admins involved, you know, a second pair of eyes, even if it's a visual observer, just someone out there in the field to help them maintain eye contact, visual line of sight with the drone itself. And speaking of, if that person was with you, we could actually record that we did have a visual observer with us as well. So next, the step 2, these are going to be those situational awareness questions, the ones that are hard to answer here sitting at the desk, but obvious once we're standing out in the field. So, you know, just by looking around, how populated is the area? You know, we'll say moderately populated. It's actually sparsely in my area, but I want to give a little bit more. I'm going to give you bad answers here so you can see what it would do to the score. Yeah, so let's say densely populated. So we have a lot of houses and things around us to consider. Whether or not, you know, how complex the flight path is. Maybe we have some power lines, some trees, there's buildings. There could be things that are, that are going to be getting in our way, we need to avoid. Adjacent to critical infrastructure. So this could be, think of power lines, pipelines, power plants, prisons, you know, even some of the DoD bases can come into play here. So critical infrastructure are those that are going to be, yeah, I think power plants is one of the best examples, and transmission lines, because those are probably the most frequently run into. So we could say, maybe we're nearby some power lines, maybe flying, you know, want to try to avoid flying under them unless we're working for the power company. So we'll just say nearby for this example. We have defined our takeoff and landing, at least, with maybe, you know, big, round, brightly colored takeoff and landing pad. And then lastly, what type of airspace are we in? Have we considered this yet? You know, just by opening KittyHawk, we kind of got a quick glimpse as to what airspace we're in. by creating the mission. We got a preview of what that airspace looks like. So for this example, we are outside controlled airspace, so I'll continue using this example, but I will go back, we'll go through Lance, I'll show you what that looks like and how to attach it to the flight itself. So for this example, I'm just gonna say standard and local regulations, excuse me, standard regulations. Now the final step is more the weather and forecast and daylight hours, which for the most part will be automated. If we've moved our pin, so if we're trying to run a risk assessment for a location that's an hour away, it will make us confirm the airspace. If we're getting close to sunset, sunrise time, it will make us select, you know, is this really daylight? Are we within, you know, sunrise, sunset, but not quite civil twilight? Or is this technically under a night waiver or something like that? And then of course the weather forecast is brought in as well. So as I tap next, it's going to churn all these different numbers together. So it's given me a 20, you know, maybe I need to get out and fly a little bit more. It's been about a week, you know, we need to keep up that currency, make sure I'm, you know, not getting rusty on the sticks. Now the flight score, I did mention I was going to purposefully pick some bad answers there so you could see what that looks like. That drove it up to a 40% here, which switches that flag to yellow. And then our condition score, I mean, it's beautiful blue skies here, low wind, so it is actually a perfect day for flying and reflected with that score here. Now, I did hint at the beginning about, you know, calling visual observers or, you know, what some of those items will do to the score, the overall score. And there's a balance, right? So let's say there are riskier flights out there. We work with clients that do it every day, you know, flying around power lines, inspecting power plants, oil and gas refineries. You know, these are very dangerous situations to be in with or without flying a drone. So if we have a flight that is going to have a very high flight score, we would want the other twos, you know, we would want either ideal flight conditions or even above that, we would want an experienced and a current pilot, which will help bring that risk down. So obviously, if we have an experienced pilot that hasn't flown in a month with very high risk factors involved in their, you know, local situational area, we would want, you know, ideal weather conditions to try to help balance it out. But I think you get the picture. There's a give and take here. And so it spits out a total score of 22% after it throws it all together. And I get a lot of questions as to, you know, is this going to prevent me from flying? Is this going to stop me from taking off? In short, no. What this is for is to help identify the risk factors around us. So, you know, it's good to recognize risks because that shows us that, you know, as 107 operators, as pilots, we are considering everything that's going to go into this. So let's say we run it, you know, we haven't flown in a week, you know, the pilot scores yellow, the flight scores yellow, the conditions yellow, whatever the case might be, we have a bad total score. Not necessarily a bad thing. You know, if we get a 40, 50% down here for our total, best practice, recommended procedure is, hey, it's great that we know what the risks are. What can we do to mitigate them now that we know what they are? So, you know, you saw stuff about population density. Is there ability to, you know, maybe we're just in a crowded neighborhood and we can launch from across the street where there's just a grass field or a parking lot. You know, maybe we don't need to take off underneath these power lines. We can move 50 feet, 50 yards, you know, the other way and add some separation. Maybe in that time, you know, we brought a visual observer out with us. Maybe the weather conditions improved. And then best practice here is not to try to delete or change our answers on the risk assessment. Ideally, we would run it again, get a better score based on those conditions changing. And then in that note section, we can drop, you know, called visual observer, separated to, you know, from the power lines and move to less populated area, the weather conditions improved, whatever the case might be, drop it in the notes. So when I hit done here, which is actually going to log that risk assessment, and do a quick refresh here on the web, you'll see we now have that score. So if we did have a bad score first, ideally we would see 2 risk assessments. One, the first being the higher score, and then the second, the lower score, would then have some notes as to what we did as operators to mitigate that risk. And that is all great information that helps back us up. Should something ever happen, we have a historical record of, look, every time I fly, here's my procedure, here's my checklists, I don't skip anything. Proof is in the pudding, because here's all my notes, my flight note details, and all this information just really helps us back us up as a 107 operator. So that's the risk assessment piece. The next step in the workflow is typically to knock out some checklists. So we can have a number of different types of checklists. And just to give you the categories here, you can see we have pre-flight, in-flight, post-flight, maintenance, and then kind of this catch-all of other. So depending on our workflow, depending on the type of job, the locations, we could be in, maybe we're more concerned with wildlife and encroaching on and harassing wildlife and endangered species and things like that. We could have emergency preparedness checklists for making sure our drones are set up for these unforeseen emergency circumstances. We could work for a large corporation that's very concerned with, not only are they concerned with the safety and compliance in regards to the FAA, but usually, let's say you get that operations manual for the drone program, you'll also be handed an HSE manual or a health and safety type manual. Think of OSHA here, hard hat, steel toe boots, high visibility vest, am I wearing jeans or, proper work attire? There are some other things that we could even include in this checklist to help, zip the drone program together with and help match it to some of those larger goals for the company or entities out there. So for some examples today, I think we'll go through definitely a pre-flight equipment checklist, basically pre-flighting the drone. And then we can even do, I kind of like this arrival on scene, because I was just mentioning the HSE type stuff. Think of DOTs, think of the trucks on the side of the highway, where this is stuff that we would want to track, even though it's something the FAA might never bring up in terms of, here's the HSE stuff, personal protective equipment that is, defined in our internal manual, hard hat, steel toe boots, what does that look like for us? Is the truck in park? Do we have lights on or cones out on the corner? Have we set up our drone, launch site? Do we have the pad and cones out, high visibility vest, et cetera there? Do we need to check in with a security office, with our headquarters, with anyone else? Do we notify that activity is about to begin for this mission or objective? And then a general scene size up. So just like we did in the step 2 of the risk assessment, we kind of took a look around, how close are the trees, the power lines, how close are the houses? That's kind of what size up means, is get a feel for the area. Are there down trees that we need to be aware of if we're moving around? Are there flooded areas? Things like that. So again, here's the optional attaching our aircraft so we can associate all this activity together. And then the crucial step, though, is attaching it to the mission. So there's our mission we created. And again, the note section is going to be all throughout the platform. And, with the checklist, because we can have some optional things here. So, maybe we need to dismiss one of these or provide some additional information. We can do so with the note section. So I'm just going to go ahead and log that and do a quick refresh. Just to show you, we had that risk assessment, and now we have a new checklist log popping up. So you can kind of see that as we push forward, this starts to get filled out. So as another quick example, I like that one, but I think it's important that we do a pre-flight equipment checklist. Whether it's every launch, every day, we do see some differences there between operations. So this is fairly generic, but I think it's a great example where, making sure we don't have any, aftermarket, clunky parts, anything like that, that's going to fail on us. Took everything off the charger this morning. Make sure that gimbal locks off the camera so it can move around freely and not break. Make sure those propellers are nice and tight and secure. Making sure software is up to date. So not only firmware on the aircraft and the controller, updates for the KittyHawk software as well, just making sure we're using the latest and greatest environment. So did we consider the airspace? Again, by opening KittyHawk, by creating the mission, by running the risk assessment, these are all different times where we've been presented with the airspace information and what we need to do to fly there. Same thing, the risk assessment also considered the pilot as a risk factor here. So again, that I'm safe, hazardous attitudes, all of that was included here. And this kind of a catch-all, but compliance check, double check those TFRs. Oh yeah, there was a stadium. Did I make sure there was no activity there? It's kind of that last reminder as we get closer to takeoff. And then the bottom ones that I just kind of, sorry, Goldsboro. It's the second time, feel bad, but we'll keep marching forward. So the last few items here, the sun hood, the battery bank, the SD card, we could even throw some optional items on here that might not be a requirement. Is there enough glare that justifies putting the sun hood on? Are we going to be out all day? So we need some backup controllers or battery banks to keep them alive. Extra SD cards already formatted because we're going to run out of room when we start taking videos or things like that. Lastly, this should look familiar. We want to attach it to the aircraft and attach it to the mission. And then as we log that, this checklist will now pop up on our mission over here with our other record. So that's the risk assessment and checklist. And if you have any questions on that, feel free to jump in because we're going to start transitioning a little bit. The main things I wanted to point out here on the web are the drone section, the battery section, and this checklist section. So again, earlier in the call, I hinted that we work with a lot of groups that have dedicated admins, those that are directly involved in our operations, whether they're just logging in to approve or they're actually setting the mission up and assigning them to pilots. That's where these tools come in from the web. So for the most part, you might not use these, but I'm going to go ahead and explain what they're used for so you kind of get an understanding. This is, if we as an admin want to prescribe this mission to a pilot, to an employee, we can set this up by, here's the mission, here's the objective we're going out to do. Okay, pilot Kevin, I want you to bring this drone out into the field. Here are the batteries that belong with that drone, that kit, if you will. So I'm pulling the records I just grabbed are ones that were already added in my asset section. So if you don't see anything there, no worries. So we have the drone, we have the batteries, and then as an admin, I say, okay, here's the drone and batteries. Here are the checklists that I want you to run, once you get into the field. So if we add those checklists, this is essentially us requesting those checklists as an admin from the pilot. And so we could, prescriptively set this up and give the pilot some instructions. We could even drop, we could even drop a note in the mission note section, and this works both ways. So admins can comment for pilots, and then pilots can edit the mission and comment for admins if they need a response. So again, the drones, checklist, and battery section you may or may not use. Not a requirement because obviously once we do the checklist, if we're following our operations manual instead, once we conduct that checklist, that proof ends up here as well. And then with the batteries and the drones, once we start flying, and I'll show you here in the log flight we're going to get to in a second, once we, sorry, question just distracted me. Once we start flying, those will start popping up here. Can you insert hyperlinks where NOTAMs and TFRs can be found? So that's a good question. there are some links in the land process. So if you're in condensed, if you're in tight airspace where that activity is likely, there are links right there in the notes. Now, so NOTAMs and TFRs, interesting. Let me back out. Let me go to my airspace map here on the mobile app. So TFRs, or temporary flight restrictions, are going to be these bright red, typically pretty large swaths of airspace. So we can see, and if I tap in Atlanta here, oh, this looks like maybe not active yet. So this is a presidential movement TFR that starts in a couple days. And then down here, this looks like Cape Canaveral, where they're launching, you know, I think SpaceX recently launched a new satellite from here. Watched that maybe a week or so ago. So these are going to be areas where we want to limit, you know, anyone from being in the air during that time. Obviously, you could think of things that would go wrong if we're trying to fly drones around, stuff like that. So TFRs, these are live coming from the FAA. We update our information at whatever interval the FAA updates. So some of them are 15 minutes, some of them are weekly, you know, monthly, whatever that looks like, our layers will update at the same time. When it comes to NOTAMs, that's kind of a different system. NOTAMs, or notice to airmen, which is essentially like, hey, I'm a pilot, I want to do my due diligence, I'd like to alert others that I'm going to be flying in this area, so I'm going to file a NOTAM, a notice to airmen, or sometimes a DROTAM, I've heard it called. And you could think, earlier in the call, we had talked about the live traffic view. So this, in essence, is a type of NOTAM. I want to share my information. I want to let people know I'm flying in this area. And you can see now that we're getting more daylight across the country, you can see some additional activity pop up. This is serving the same purpose as a NOTAM. Now, understood, it's not as an official capacity as coming from the FAA's website, but as we push forward with remote ID and what this system that we're looking at will become, you will essentially get more and more live style NOTAMs. We'll be able to communicate this type of information live through remote ID, and it's going to be a little bit more accurate, a little bit more actionable, because it will only show those that are actively flying and, you know, using that area, versus we could submit a NOTAM that lasts for, you know, hours, all day, etc., and it looks like we've just remained in that spot flying all day. So I think with the technology, with the regulations that are coming, we're going to see this type of technology improve drastically. You know, there's a lot of cool stuff coming with the remote ID for sure. So yeah, that was a good question regarding mission planning, because you certainly would want to keep an eye out, you know, as we looked at the airspace, you would want to keep an eye out for any of those TFRs, anything around stadiums that would prevent us, you know, from actually taking off or flying that day at that location. Excuse me. So pushing forward here, we've kind of defined the drones, the batteries, the checklist. We can now see the logs coming into the platform. The couple of sections we have not touched being documents and the flight logs themselves. So we'll give some quick document examples, and then we'll. So the documents will really help us round out the mission. This may or may not be required for you, you know, again, because let me finish that explanation. So as we push forward with the flight logs, we'll have the drone information, we'll have the battery information, we'll know who the pilot is, and just by running those checklists, we'll have the logs. So I want to save you, you know, I want to make this as efficient as possible for you. I want to save you a little bit of homework here. We can round it out. You know, if you're a little bit more detail oriented and you want to fill in every field, totally fine to do so. I just want to make it clear that it's not a requirement, because this data can be captured elsewhere with this workflow. So again, some quick document example. Oh, Was there a question there? Okay, no worries. Might have been just someone new joining.
Hey, Kevin?
Yeah.
Just to let you know that we do want you to document in your documents, we want you to document any of your, want to save your license, some of your 107 certification, and also your NCDOT operator permits for yourself and any of your students who would be, that get certified. That way we have records of their information. We just store it in the documents. So that's what we want you to have in there. So if we have a question or anything, their information is readily available inside of the under documents.
Perfect. And that also brings up a good point. So David mentioned, you know, we just want those documents in the account as a record. Now that doesn't necessarily, you know, again, we can attach it to the mission so that we tie all that good stuff together. Now, if we simply load our pilot information in there and we have 107s, you know, the drone asset itself is going to have registration information, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. So again, this step of attaching like the 107 is similar to attaching some of this other where we're just rounding it out so it's there and accessible, you know, kind of right at the face of the mission here. And you'll see if I click into these here and let them load up, you know, there's an actual digital copy of my Part 107. There's the drone registration. So these are live digital copies of our documents, you know, just in case we ever need to reference, you know, for an FAA inspector, for anyone that questions us, like law enforcement, we'll have that information. You know, we should have our license and stuff on us anyway if we're operating under 107, but, you know, we can lose wallets, things happen. It's just another way to kind of back us up. So to point out, there's the document section here on the mission, which when I click this green button, it was actually pulling from other documents loaded to the account, whereas the blue button allows us to upload straight to the mission itself. So again, that green button, those documents were previously uploaded to the account through the media documents section. So there's the same list we were just looking at, and we can manage, you know, add, download a copy, change the file, or remove through this section. So I'll head back to the mission. I would like to get through a flight log example and show you what Lance looks like before I'm going to take another break here. We'll give you guys another 5-10 minutes coming up. So we'll get through the flight example and then take a quick break, and then we're going to dive into the rest of the web dashboard and account setup there. So with the flights, there's a number of different ways that flights can end up coming into the KittyHawk platform. Now, obviously, just by flying within KittyHawk, we can automatically capture all this good information by flying in DJI. We can pull those records over through the DJI import function, and we can also use these manual flight logs that I hinted at before to capture. It could be a totally unsupported, and I'd like to use air quotes there because essentially through this process we support any aircraft. It could even be an old, you know, RC airplane that has none of this fancy connection stuff that we can plug a phone in, etc. We can still log our activity for that aircraft, for their batteries, for myself as a pilot, through something like this manual flight timer. So as I mentioned, you know, we can go field by field and manually enter all this information, but I love, you know, the timer is a great example where we can just simplify that process. So we're a pilot getting ready to fly. We've got the drone out in front of us. We can then press start when we launch. The drone takes off, goes and does that mission, you know, training mission, whatever the case might be, that comes back and lands. Once we stop that timer, we can then use it to record a new flight. And you'll see a lot of the information's captured for us. So we have the timestamp, we have the duration, we capture our weather, we capture our airspace. And when we're going through even a manual log, pretty simple. We can attach it to the mission, which is that critical link to bring everything together. We can attach any authorizations, and if I tap in here, you can see whether we filed for Lance, whether we are using a COA or the mutual understanding, like David mentioned, or maybe it's a COA waiver, whatever the case might be. We could include that, even down to maybe we have permission for private property to fly at that location. We could include even those documents here in the system, so that type of information stays tightly together. Because if we're ever approached, law enforcement, hey, this is private property, you don't have permission to be here, right there in our mission, we can tap on the document and gain access to it. Here's the property owner signed off, telling me I can. So
Kevin, I would say absolutely. If you have any type of documentation, you want to put it in your general documents also, so that you have it readily available on your app. So wherever you are, if anybody has a question, it's readily available. Also, for those of us that are at the state level, if we want to see your information, we can always go and verify that it's there, because we should have access to all that information. Correct, Kevin?
yes. Yes. So
instead of you having to send us emails with this information, which you're welcome to do so, it would be better to make sure that it's all contained within the KittyHawk system, because that's what we're telling the FAA, and NCDOT, is this is the way, and all these other people who would be concerned about our safety and our securities, that we're handling all of these things that are FAA requirements, NCDOT operator requirements, and insurance requirements through KittyHawk. So everything we need is documented, and no one has any questions about that. We're a fly-by-night deal, that we know what we're doing. So it's important to make sure that we put all the information that we have, everything that we need, into our KittyHawk system.
Absolutely. And just to clarify that again, so if it's something general that we're going to use for different missions throughout, the next year, I'd recommend uploading that as a document here at the account level. If it's more of a one-time, hey, we're doing something special, I have permission to, fly at this location, or whatever the case might be, again, this blue button allows us to upload things directly to that mission.
And Kevin, let me give an example. Skills USA.
Yeah.
Skills USA will have our competition in April at the Greensboro Coliseum. In the parking lot, we have written permission. We had last year written permission from them to allow us to do so. So because, we have to have the land. The FAA controls the air, but taking off and landing, is required of the landowner. And so we had that information. This would be something that we would put into our documents at the state level that would cover any of those type of things. So if you had a major event, you would want to, like you're going to go to a fairgrounds and do something. Of course, remember, you would need permission from them to do so. Make sure that it is in writing, and you can put that into you will put that into your particular flight plan for that day. In our case, we would put it in the generic track. And if you wanted to, is there a way, Kevin, to link something from the generic document and copy a copy of it into the plan, into the flight plan itself that day?
Yeah, so this document section here for the, so there's two things. We can do it at the mission level, which is going to include all of our flight activity. So multiple flights wrapped up in a mission can be covered under, the permission to fly on private property, the permission to record, take pictures and video, those would apply for all those flights that day. Now, there are scenarios where the authorizations might apply specifically to flights. Maybe easiest example is, think of, the controlled airspace circle. Here, maybe I can pull this up and make it a little easy visual. So if we have controlled airspace like this, and you can imagine, some power lines, a pipeline, maybe they're doing highway inspections, something that cuts straight through the controlled airspace. We can file for Lance, but Lance, currently there is a limit to the system. FAA only lets us authorize so much airspace at a time. So we'll eventually max out on the size of the Lance authorization. So if you kind of think of, maybe we could get 1, 2, 3 lance to cover the entire strip of where that cuts through controlled airspace, maybe we only have 2 or 3 flights that fall under each lance. And that's where we would have to attach the authorization straight to the flight log versus attaching it to the mission as a whole. Because then we wouldn't know, which flights did we fly under which authorization. This makes it very clear cut to where, here's our permission to be here, here's our permission to record at the mission level, at the bucket level, and then the individual flight logs will kind of connect the dots on the specific authorizations. So yeah, kind of what I'm doing here on the left-hand side, and we're flexible. That could be a document, that could be a PDF, it could be a picture, could be Lance through KittyHawk. So in this example, I just attached a COA, a sample COA from RDU, and when we do our Lance, we'll go through another example. And let's go ahead and run through the Lance real quick, and then I'll give everyone another 5-10 minutes and grab a break. So to wrap out this flight log, we attached our authorization here. Again, we'll want to link our aircraft. We can now choose our battery because we are at the flight level. So, we'll need 1 battery per flight, or, multiple flights per battery. Now the location, because we're doing this flight log, it's going to ask us to confirm, basically, are you where you're standing now, or are you doing this after the fact? Maybe it's a day later and we're just recording that flight. So we can use our coordinates, pulls up the map. There's my current GPS. I'm just going to use set, and that'll record the weather and airspace based on that location now. And again, there's that note section. And this is where, David, I think you wanted to stress the importance of this, especially for non-107 students. So again, you as the teachers, as the Part 107 holders, are going to be the ones, ultimately, you're the operator, you're the responsible party, and those that are training and learning are essentially flying under your Part 107. So we will want to, again, we want to give credit where credit's due for the students and their activity. And then we also want to give, you proper credit because you're the one spending time with them on the sticks. You're the one overseeing their training. So, you get credit for that as well. So down here, we could say, again, we have the mission name that has us as the teacher, what block, the date, and maybe it's just as simple as putting the student's name down here for that flight log. I don't know if you guys, if you use any other IDs, like if they have logins or something like that, that would identify them easier. We could do both, we could do either, whatever makes the most sense. And I will let David either put a finer point on that or follow up, similar to how we got the mission name worked out. And I realize he's probably multitasking, so.
Sorry, I heard you just ask me a question. I just want to let you know too that during the break we'll verify. They went ahead and gave us manual access to Zoom, so now we have all the features of Zoom. So, and I just made you co-host, so we do have the ability to do things that we did not do before. But anyway, what was your question again? I apologize.
I was just getting to the point where we were speaking about when you first logged on about how the teachers will be the official Part 107 holder, the ones that the flight logs will be associated to, unless the student has their own 107, then they can actually accrue hours there. Now, again, because you're flying essentially for government, you're flying in a professional capacity, so you do need to utilize your Part 107. So because they're not certified, they're flying under the teacher's Part 107, we'll want to specify that, the flight log itself is going to be attached to me, the teacher, as an official pilot. But in the flight notes, we'll want to include the student name so that we can also properly give them, some credit for their activity. If we have any minimums for the semester for, for them to meet, oh, you didn't get your flying time in, you need your, 5-10 hours, whatever that might look like. And I just wanted to pass you the ball to either let you restate it or put a finer point on it.
No, I think that's exactly what we want to do, because because under FAA requirements, you are the pilot in command. There's only one pilot in command in that classroom. Now, if you have some students that are already certified and you want to let them help you, any of your certified, if you have a kid in your class that may be taking your class for whatever purpose, I don't know, so they can get it to, because you got to pass the first class to get to the second class. So you could have some students that went on their own and got their certification and are taking your class so that they can get to take the second class. I mean, that's possible. The point is, if you have some students who are certified, clearly they're going to be tracking their own information. But if you're flying, the pilot in command is responsible for having their flight log. So therefore, if you're the pilot in command, you are the one flying that craft, whether you're at the control or not, you know, the person at the controls. So you have to make sure that you track that information. I would agree with what Kevin said, is you want to go in there and make sure you denote which students were flying during that time period, so that, because if something happens, you might need to go back and say, well, this student was flying. Who was flying this, they might say. Well, this person was flying. I would say, who's your visual, if you have visual observers, which you should have, who's your person at the controls, who's your visual observer? You know, you need to control, you need to have all of that. I think that's important. So anything you can put down in there is important for that. Yeah, just like that, I think that makes logical sense to me. Remember, there's a lot of documentation. Somebody says, hey, it takes me 30 minutes to go through the pre-checks before I can actually fly. Well, guess what? How long does it take an airplane pilot in a plane to go through their checks before they actually crank up that engine and pull out of the gateway? You have to make sure that you're safe. Safety is the number one thing that FAA concerns themselves with, and we have to meet the safety requirements. So checklists are important. Yes, it takes time to do that. You could have multiple people checking out multiple crafts at the same time, so that when it's time to fly, everybody's ready to fly, but you still have to go through the checks. And you have to have documentation showing that. So have we covered check sheets yet?
We did go through
some
different checklist examples. Yeah.
I just have so many.
No, I totally get it. No worries. I think we're managing so far.
Okay, good enough.
So we got through that flight log example. Now if I go ahead and save that, and again, I'm going to do one more flight log with you with the LANT system, and I promise I'll give you guys a break. Do a quick refresh here so we can see what that flight log looks like. So there we go. Now each one of our sections here in the mission is rounded out. And if we look at the details of this flight, even though, you watched, we just did a simple timer here through the app, but we're still capturing, here's the time, the duration, the pilot, the drone, the battery. Did we use some special authorization? We have the same notes from what happened in the field as to who was flying, who was watching, etc. There's our airspace preview, our weather preview. And we do have the ability to upload photos and things like that. I don't know that that'll be used, but hey, worth pointing it out. Sometimes just attaching a picture, again, picture speaks 1,000 words. Sometimes that picture helps give, oh yeah, I do remember flying there, or you kind of get that better situational awareness of what that day looked like. Was it foggy? Was it overcast? Was it bright and sunny? Again, it gives you that context. So, 6 months, a year from now, it's all, obviously the weather and airspace is still going to be there. But again, sometimes that visual just really helps depending on what we're doing. So the last example for LANTs, and again, with all these parallels, we could be doing the risk assessments on the web. I showed you where that was on the mission. If I back out here, we can do checklists on the web by heading down to assets checklists. We can log flights manually on the web. And lastly, we can also do LANTs on either the mobile app or on the web as well, which is going to be on our airspace screen. So I just want to point out that parallel so you know that that airspace planning tool is still here, no matter what platform you're on. Looks pretty much the same. You get the same type of information breakdown. I'll say most commonly people do it from the mobile app, so we're going to focus there. And if you notice, this is identical to the airspace map that we looked at the beginning, because that's essentially it. When we request Lance, it needs to know where are we trying to fly. So this brings us right to our airspace map. Important note here, if we tried to request Lance where we are, it won't even let us because we are outside of controlled airspace here. So no Lance needed. Another point of clarification, and this is important, I get a lot of questions on this because it is a little misleading. So earlier in the call, I mentioned the magenta circle is actually what indicates controlled airspace, but yet you see this colorful Lance grid kind of overlap on the circle. Now, really it's a leftover fragment of trying to put squares on a circle because again, we can only get Lance in controlled airspace. So if I move my pin here, you'll see the advisory button is still green, even though I'm within that Lance grid, because I am still 0.37 miles from controlled airspace. Now, if I step in, you'll notice the advisory button will turn blue. And if I open that up, that mileage marker now disappeared. We are now within that airspace. We are within controlled Class Charlie airspace here. So that I do get a ton of questions on that. You probably will from students as well. There's going to be a major update to the Lance system coming very soon, actually in July. So we're going to see some improvement here. We have some new layers that will make this make sense a little better. But again, the Lance system dictated by the FAA, they essentially control what we can or cannot do with the system. Everything that gets introduced needs that approval. So, you know, we're working on it. We're working with them to make it better, more streamlined, easier to use. And that's one of those features we'll be improving very shortly. So again, with Lance, okay, now we're in controlled airspace. We want to file for it. We'll go ahead and press our advisory button, just like we would, you know, checking our mission. We can get instant authorization up to 400 feet here. And there's that weather tab we looked at. And actually for this example, I'm going to move to slightly lower airspace to give you a better example. So again, the ceiling where we started was 400, this lime green's 300. And as you get closer to the runway, those colors indicate lower and lower pre-approved altitudes until you get to the red 0-foot zones there. So where we are is a good example. I'll tap that advisory button again. There's the two advisories there. We're in controlled airspace and we can get Lance. So this is, you know, good news. That's what you want to see. And if we tap more on the Lance card, instant approval, instant or auto approval up to 300 feet. And then there's that further coordination if we need to go above, but most of the time we'll probably avoid that. So now you'll notice we have this big get authorization bar up top, and we can tap that to begin the process. So again, we will be filing as Part 107 operators. So we'll want to make sure that profile, you know, our operator profile is all complete. This is just another visual breakdown of those different altitudes. So again, at the grid box we're in here, we can get instant approval up to 300 feet. If we go above that, you'll see it clearly tells us that we are going to send this to further coordination, which is that longer manual process from the FAA and ATC, or the controlling tower. And we can zoom in, we can adjust our flight boundaries as needed. So I'm just going to show you, you know, we could essentially fit it to whatever boundary we need to. I think that looks okay. And then move forward. So again, we are staying within the altitude restriction, so we can get instant Lance. So now for the next 30 minutes is fine. We can always adjust this. We can request Lance up to 90 days out in the future. And the duration is ultimately limited by daylight hours. So, you know, from sunrise to sunset, we'd be fine. If you try to go beyond that, Lance system will kick it back because Lance is only available for daylight. where if we do have a night waiver, just side caveat, I'm not sure if anyone really does have a night waiver here, but if you wanted to fly under your night waiver in controlled airspace, you would still have to get authorization through the FAA, but that's outside the LANT system. You would have to use their drone zone website where you register your drones and things like that. So pushing forward, it's doing a quick check with the FAA servers. Is this a valid request? Are we good to do, this flight here? And everything looks good, so it comes back green. So we're just double checking, the time and location details. And when we go to the final step, it will include, there's the verified phone number, the Part 107 information, and then we do have some acknowledgements towards the bottom. So, I'm sorry, someone asked about NOTAMs and TFR links. And I apologize, I can't quite read your name. So whoever asked about NOTAMs and TFRs, the links are built right in here. So we can tap these, it'll bring us right to the official source, but it's essentially just an acknowledgement that, yes, I agree to follow and operate what I signed up for by taking the 107. The TFRs, do show live in KittyHawk. And if we are in, special use airspace or, want to double check NOTAMs, please do so. And then the last four are specifically about the LANS process. So once we've acknowledged them all, we can now agree and submit. This is going live to the FAA server. It should get returned almost instantaneously here. You'll see our advisory button just updated there from 2 to 3 because now we have a new LANS starting in a minute. This is essentially a new approved airspace just for us. So we can see it there. We can tap that card to get more details of who requested it, the date and how high. Obviously, it's right there on our airspace. And momentarily, if you hear that text message that just came through, and apologies, I'm going to try to do this quick because I know people were texting and calling me. So if I open this one up, you can see here's the actual request, the acknowledgement. So we're not just kind of banking, how do I know it just didn't come through the app, or I'm strictly relying on the KittyHawk system. This is kind of that two-factor authorization, the confirmation that, it has been received and approved. And you'll see it actually converts it to UTC, Universal Time Code, or Zulu, or Greenwich Mean Time. Basically, it's the aviation standard time zone that is used globally. And it does that because we're touching FAA servers. So it comes back in UTC, so don't let that time zone throw you off. And if I go back to KittyHawk and we'll take a look at that LANS one more time, you'll see that it is converted to local time zones. So, don't worry if the times don't match. That's why they're different time zones. And lastly, before we pause for a break here, if I give you one more flight example, we went through that flight log previously where we did the manual timer and we attached that COA document, which could have been a LANS like we just filed. And what we skipped over in this flight deck, where we would be connected to our drone and getting ready to fly, and I can even show you what this looks like in a second once it's all fired up and connected. We can then, before even launching the drone, we can pre-link to the mission. We can pre-link that LANS authorization. So this is the same authorization screen we looked at with the manual log. I'll tap LANS. There's the LANS that we just requested. So we'll select that one and link it. So now when we connect and launch our aircraft, everything's already pre-associated and connected together, which will help in our due diligence, showing that if we were flying in controlled airspace, we better have some sort of authorization attached to cover our activity. So all right, we'll plan on taking a break at 11 here, and what I can do in the meantime, I'm just firing up my drone that's sitting here on the desk. And what I can show you is if I back out here, this is also a piece that many people miss on the platform. So, you know, how do I actually fly in KittyHawk? There's all these tools, all this information. How do I just want to, you know, connect and fly? So once we get through all our workflow and all our steps, you know, we still connect to the drone just like we would. So I have my Mavic controller plugged into my iPhone here. I just fired up my drone. Let me rotate that back. I'm going to fire up my controller. And keep an eye on this card in the bottom left under flight deck, because as soon as it detects the drone, it will switch it over. Here we go, connected to aircraft. Then it detects the model, connected to Mavic Pro, and that button switches to fly. So if I tap on that button, it'll still look very familiar, but we have some new information now, right? We know what aircraft we're connected to. We can detect the battery because, again, the software is reading those internal serial numbers. And now we even have access to our sensors. So, you know, double checking that we don't need to calibrate our compass, our IMU, gimbal, etc. You can see, again, I'm inside, so my satellite connection is not great. But even down to batteries here on the right, we're good. We covered the telemetry, the flight profiles, the streaming, and then here's where we can then link to the mission, link to Lance. And you'll notice now in the top right here, our fly button is not grayed out. And if I tap on this, it'll now enter. So I do this on the mobile sometimes. It'll now enter our in-flight screen. And I'm just going to flip it the other way so it takes up a little less real estate. But now this screen should look pretty familiar if you're used to the DJI system. And now we're in the in-flight view where we could then launch and fly. And I think that's a good stopping point for us as we got through. You see it's asking, because I have streaming enabled, so it's asking to use the microphone so we could communicate. And so, yeah, that will bring us to a well-rounded out mission. And if we do all those steps to kind of either lead up to the flights, or we could even conduct, you know, we could conduct the activity, our risk assessments, our checklists, go run our flights. And then we could even tie everything together at the end of the day, again, because we could use the mission. And then by using these green arrows, the green plus marks, we can attach previous activity. So we can always pull things into a mission, even after the fact. So I'll still be around. You know, I'll go ahead, we'll call another 10-minute break. So maybe 5 minutes after the hour. I'll be around if anyone wants to ask questions or chat. So we'll go ahead and take a break, and afterwards we'll jump back into the web dashboard and round out the rest of the discussion.
So Kevin, I was saying that's one of the things, because you guys work with FAA and to do the Before You Fly app and other things, I think that puts you in a unique situation that you can speak as a non-vendor related to something that's available to everybody, and then have the opportunity to sell your wares.
Yeah,
you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's kind of part. You know, we love working with schools. It has been a little tricky, because there's budgets involved, larger groups typically. You know, once we get into drone programs, we're talking dozens to hundreds of pilots on the account. You know. And we realize that our typical model kind of breaks down. So we have done some special, you know, as David mentioned in the beginning, you know, we call it the ambassador program. Because we understand the importance of learning these tools and learning how to use them correctly. And whether or not, you know, 10 years down the road, they take a job with a drone, or whether or not they use KittyHawk, hey, it'd be great if they do. But it's understanding all the different components that we need to track, understanding what goes into, you know, identifying risks and how to mitigate them. Because essentially at this point, the industry is still in a learning phase. I mean, yeah, there are groups that started early that are kind of getting to a more mature place, but most programs are still in their infancy. So the more we can share, the more we can, you know, teach each other, I think the better off, you know, not only we'll be here in North Carolina, but as an industry as a whole. You know, it takes one, you know, Gatwick type airport event to, you know, shut down flight. Obviously something else took care of shutting down the flights temporarily. You know, but any kind of setback like that is going to be a setback for us as an industry, you know, and not just personally. So the more that we can surface this information, the more that we can help people understand airspace and get authorization or access to the airspace, I think the better off everyone will be. So I always enjoy participating in these things, love to be a part of them, and definitely look forward to continuing to work with everybody. No, I certainly know that feeling.
But this has been a very good session. I mean, I appreciate. I think everyone that's been on here has learned a lot, and hopefully we need to get them busy doing it now. You know, the key is we're going to have to do some type of a validation process to ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
That is a crucial step. I could sit here and talk for hours, but where it really comes down to it is once you go through it once or twice, and I think even David hinted at this, where, you know, hey, it's important to do all these checks, you know, whether it takes you 15, 20 minutes, doesn't matter. Here's why it's important. Once you understand this workflow and you know where all the components are and what steps you need to take, you could really get through even the process that we just did, the mission, the risk assessment, multiple checklists, including authorizations and documents and things like that, 5-10 minutes max. You know, once you get that down, you could fly through them again without skipping anything, without becoming too complacent. You know, you can get all this good data in just a 5 to 10 minute workflow. But yeah, the crucial step is going out and doing it, pretending like you're, you know, treat it like it's live, like it's a real flight. And the more you do that, the more efficient you'll become in moving through these different components. And this will seem less and less cumbersome. I know there's a steep learning curve. And the only way to battle that is just, yeah, get it in your hands, get flying, and get using it.
Hey, Kevin.
Yes, sir.
Paul here. I know that I'm rather a Luddite when it comes to working with computers and stuff. I never find them intuitive. But I've been struggling all morning long and I've only now figured out how to input my drone, put the information in there. Because I kept going to assets on the computer.
Mm-hmm.
I would click on the assets and there's 0 assets listed there. But it won't let me click on an ad. And I never noticed up in the top right-hand thing, add another aircraft. And I'm like, gee, I don't have any assets. I'm trying to put it in. It won't let me put it in. And only recently figured, oh, go to that upper right-hand corner and click add aircraft, which I never, you know, my eyes just never gravitated up there.
Yeah, some of those links.
Very frustrating because I hardly ever hear anything after that because I'm just trying to figure out how to get my damn aircraft in here. But I think I see what your program does. I like it. It's wonderful. The other thing that was a struggle for me is understanding that in order to use your software appropriately, we're flying basically through your software. So that last little bit that you put there said, okay, once you hook everything up, make sure you open up the KittyHawk app and then hit fly from there. Because that's just not intuitive to me.
Yeah, no, and that's why I kind of literally picked it up so you could see it. A lot of people do miss that, where they're going, hey, my DJI app's not communicating with KittyHawk, what's wrong? That's usually a misunderstanding as well. And Paul, you got like 5-10 minutes ahead of me. We got the profile set up, and as I was jumping into the web kind of details, I wanted to show you exactly, how to add assets from the web, what it would look like in the app. So there's a couple different ways we can handle that. And I guess we're right at that time. So a couple minutes over, so we can go ahead and get back on track here. As Paul just brought up, hey, we got our profile set up. We got our 107 information added. I have all these, I've got the drone, I've got batteries. How do I get this stuff into the system itself? So there are a couple ways we can do this. If we head down to our assets here, and you can go into your aircraft and batteries, here's just a general list. And again, if you remember, when I looked at the examples before, we had the internal serial number. And that's because the software is directly communicating with the drone and the battery. So, you know, I do have an admin login, so it might look a little different, but if I just open this to give you that view again, you know, here's the internal versus the external serial number. If we add the aircraft on the web, we can't capture that internal number. So at some point, it's okay to add it on the web and go ahead and fill out all this information, but at some point we'll want to fire up that drone, connect it to KittyHawk, and then pull in that serial number there. So every time, no matter who's flying that drone, no matter, you know, where we are, it will recognize, oh, this is Kevin's drone, this is Paul's drone, because we've allowed it to establish that connection. So I'll take a step back. If we go to assets and aircrafts, here's just the general view. As we were just talking about, there is the add aircraft button up here. But what I want to show you, and forgive me, I try not to show these accounts, but I'm going to hop into just an empty account that I know is not going to have my aircraft. So bear with me one moment. So what I want to show you is the connection procedure for the first time we hook up our drone to KittyHawk. So my drone's still powered on, my remote controller's powered on, I have KittyHawk fired up, and they're connected. Here in the bottom left corner of the flight deck, you can see we've detected the drone. It's reading connected to Mavic Pro. And if we tap fly, you'll see we now have a new pop-up we didn't before. New craft detected. You know, hey, this looks like a new serial number. Is this one of your assets that you want to add to the account? So in this example, we could do add. It'll ingest, there's the serial number coming from the flight profile, from the flight controller. And this is what the software, whether it's DJI or KittyHawk, this is what the software will look for. It can't read the label on the outside of the drone that, you know, someone slapped to the shell. It's reading the internal number that the drone is telling it, you know, this is my number. So if we add that, that will pull in the aircraft details, and then we'd have to go back either in the app or the web and, you know, rename it to whatever friendly name we gave it, add our FAA registration and things like that. Now, in Paul's example, if we added it on the web first, we'll actually have another option here on the web, on the mobile app, that says link. So if we have assets to link with, that will be an option. So again, if we've never set anything up and this is the first time setting up connecting our aircraft in KittyHawk, we can simply use the add feature and then update it after the fact with all that good information. If we go ahead and do our due diligence and create the aircraft on the web, then when we connect it to the mobile app, you can use the link option, and basically once you select that aircraft, all it will do is pull in that internal serial number with the record you've already created, and that's, you know, how we can identify proper drone and how the system identifies that we're using, you know, the proper drone, and batteries for that matter. So, you know, for this example, we can add the aircraft, and now it's saying, hey, wait a minute, we've detected a new battery as well. Do you want to add this to your account? And we can do so. And because it was previously stored as my KittyHawk asset, it is actually reading, you know, here's the type of aircraft, here's the pilot, here's the battery, and then we get all those great sensor details just below. So that's the kind of two ways to get the aircraft and batteries into the system. And again, at some point, you'll want to connect it to the app so that we can pull in those internal serial numbers. And then no matter who logs into your account and, you know, connects up, or whoever's flying, it will always know that this is, oh, this is Kevin's drone, this is Paul's, you know, etc. So that's kind of the aircraft and battery setup portion. When it comes to rounding out the account, you know, we've already talked about the documents that we'll want to upload, any COAs, waivers, permission to be on premise, things like that. The one item, and this is something that I'm glad to help with, if we have templates out there. Now, I realize some of these classes might be taught towards different goals or aims. So we looked through some checklist examples. Obviously, we have very flexible categories when it comes to that, you know, the pre-flight, post-flight, other, maintenance, you know, these are all good categories to have for each aircraft. What I'm getting at here is we'll need to add some checklists to the account for you to be able to log a checklist in the mobile app. If this is your first time logging in and you hit log checklist, you're probably looking at a blank screen, or, you know, something that, yeah, exactly, looks like this. We just have no option to do anything. So we'll want to come on the web. You can do it from the mobile app. I find it a little bit easier to interact and type on the web. So you can come on the web and create the checklist here. If you need templates like, hey, we fly Mavics, hey, we fly Phantoms, I'm looking for a maintenance checklist, glad to help with that as well. And I did drop in my chat, in the chat window for this session, I dropped a little note about if you don't see the correct school or you see the wrong school, reach out to Kevin at KittyHawk, and I totally left off the suffix, so I'm going to update that real quick. So if you want some checklist examples, or I can help because you're in the wrong school, I'm dropping my email one more time here. And yes, so Paul's follow-up question is, we can connect the aircraft to KittyHawk and update that field in the platform. It will detect the battery that we're already connected to and pull that in. And I was just looking to see if I could reach another battery to show you. But if I take my drone here, power it down, swap out the batteries and power it back up and keep everything still connected to KittyHawk, all I have to do is swap the battery. It will then detect the new battery and say, hey, we detected a new battery. Do you want to add this to your account? And just like that, we just tap add, and all that information will be brought into the our account as well. And there's my email posting in the chat. I left off the suffix there. So if you do need to reach out, it's kittyhawk.io, Kevin at kittyhawk.io. And I'm glad to help giving some checklist templates or anything like that. Although David might have some templates that we, you know, because again, this is, if we're introducing something statewide, maybe we want a little more consistency, a little more commonality. So, you know, we can somewhat standardize these checklists, which I think would make everyone's, you know, life a little easier. Okay, so we've set up our aircraft, we've set up our battery, and to address Paul's question here, you know, we now have a new aircraft. It looks brand new. You know, there's no flight activity. Everything's zeroed out. How do I get my other activity into the platform? So I did mention earlier in the call, we have the DJI import feature for that. So we talked about it here on the app. But if I come over on the web here to data integrations, now that we have our aircraft set up, which important the notion, you do want to add the aircraft before you set up the import here, because you can end up creating duplicate aircraft, batteries, you know, as long as we make that connection with KittyHawk and we add it, you know, we add that flight controller serial number, we'll be good to go. And it does not like me flipping it around like that. So to bring over our historical activity, first we need to, if I click this connect card, it's as simple as entering your DJI email and password. So first we need to make sure that the DJI application that we flew with on whatever device is set up to sync to the cloud. So I could give you a quick example there. If I open up my Go4, so this one's going to take over the screen. Let me back out. It's going to go crazy because I'm at the desk. So here we go. So if I head over to my flight records, so I tapped on me, tapped on flight records, then there's a little cloud sync up here in the top right corner. And if we tap on that, that's how we get our flight logs off of the device onto the DJI cloud. And then once we have it on the DJI cloud, then we'll be able to set up the integration and download them. Again, it's a one-way street from DJI into KittyHawk. And so that will help us update our flight logs with all our past activity. And Mario's asking, what's the best workflow for non-DJI drones? And Mario, not sure if you saw this before, but just to circle back on that, when I opened up this add button here in the bottom center, let me get the pop-up to go away. This log flight, the first flight example I went to, where I would run a timer. So let's say like the Parrot is a good one. And so there's some interesting stuff coming. On the very beginning of the call, I mentioned we're working on a new enterprise platform. And it's interesting that you mentioned both Parrot drones, the Anafi drones, the Anafi Thermal, etc. Maybe you're using the EB and Pix4D, which is an automated flight platform. So if we have a few minutes at the end, I might give you guys some spoilers. But ultimately, to answer your question, the best way to do that now is to add the aircraft and batteries manually, from the web this way. And then once they're in here, like you can see, here's an EB example, or one that we would not directly connect with. And then when we use this flight timer, we start, stop, let the drone do its thing, it comes back, and then we can just use that to set up the flight record, attach it to the mission. Oh, I'm in the wrong account to attach it to our mission. But it's basically that initial workflow that we used. Okay, yeah, totally independent of what drone. Once we use the timer, we can attach the aircraft record, the battery record, so we're keeping flight hours for us as a pilot, flight hours for the aircraft, cycles on the battery, and even, so if I took another step back to the mission, even if we were recording our flight logs that way, we're still capturing 99% of the information. Whoops, the main thing we're going to be missing here, let me go into the flight log specifically. The main thing we're going to be missing in the flight log is that top-down, the telemetry on the breadcrumb trail of what the flight path looked like. That's the only thing we lose when doing a manual workflow like this. Manual flight log workflow. Okay, so we talked about adding aircraft, the batteries, how to get our assets onto the account. There's a couple little things that we can cover on the web. So again, there's going to be all the parallels back and forth. We have our missions page here. We can view missions on the app, airspace, our filed LANC authorizations. So all this is, we can go back if we forgot to attach it to a flight or something like that. We'll always be able to reference our LANC authorizations. There we go. So we just get a total historical record of what's been approved, rejected, canceled, whatever the case might be. Again, activity, self-explanatory. We covered this on the app. The main one I want to point out here is maintenance. So again, this is leaning more towards the admin side of things, those responsible for making sure the drones are in airworthy condition. So this is just a general list of every maintenance event we've ever added to the account here. I think a little more useful is to click into the aircraft view, which gives us some stats. And if I zoom out, it'll look a little more normal. So it'll give us some stats on the aircraft itself. And then over here, obviously recent flights on the left, recent maintenance events on the right. So there are clients that use this for many different reasons. And just like the note sections for other components of the platform, maintenance events can serve multiple purposes. So, obviously, if we've come across a scratched lens or a broken prop, that would signify a maintenance event that we want to correct. We can also, I've seen clients use this for, how do I know where this drone is assigned, what location? So you can essentially put your school information, or, if it's your personal drone or whatever the case might be, we can add some details about the aircraft, maybe the controller that belongs with it, or if there's, again, iPads that go with it, you can put all the serial numbers together kind of in one spot. So if you ever have to look them up, you know which one belongs to which. Again, we have maintenance checklists. So we would have logs of when we did our maintenance checklist. So this is just an example here, somewhat unnecessary, but again, some people like to do the two in parallel. Now you'll see some of these red ones I've entered as examples, where we can mark it when we enter the maintenance event that this affects its airworthiness. So if there was a crash or something cracked, we flew into a building and lost a whole prop arm, that's going to be catastrophic. That drone is grounded, probably literally, whether we flew into a tree or a branch and, got it stuck and something happened to it. We want to record all of that information here. We can get as detailed as we want. So I do even see clients use like a ticket system here, to where, hey, we've closed out, this is our maintenance event number 1. We had a battery puncture that we had to replace. And then here's what it would look like. Open issue number 2. There's a little scratch on the camera lens, and we either have to get a new lens or get the whole gimbal unit replaced. And I mentioned, down to controllers and gimbals and sensors, we can include as much detail here as possible. So it's searchable and referenceable and everything like that. And lastly, of course, the documents here as well. We've already looked at the registration, so I don't need to open it, but we can attach that drone registration right to the aircraft in our system. So again, we touched on documents, the pictures and videos I don't think we'll be using regularly, the live traffic we've looked at. The streams may or may not be of use, might be interesting to showcase, at least so they know the ability is there. Maybe, understanding that when someone's streaming, it's probably not best practice to go, full throttle and do quick spin arounds. But yeah, you want to have a little bit more purposeful control over the drone and, steady movements, almost like you're trying to capture like a videography shot, something nice and smooth and easy that someone sitting in mobile command that might have limited internet, whatever that case looks like, can follow along with you. So the streaming we won't spend too much time on. The DJI import under data integrations we did talk about. So this is where we need to enter our DJI information to pull over that historical flight data. The API we can skip over, that's custom integration stuff for enterprise groups. The reporting is definitely going to be useful for you guys. So this is kind of a 2-part, team report or operational report. We kind of get the total flights and missions displayed on the account here. Currently, this is showing us a year to date, as you can see up top, but we can filter this out by the month, kind of get a better understanding of how our activity picked up and grew throughout the year. Maybe we need to justify by purchasing additional drones, getting additional Part 107, people trained that can help offer some backup. So a number of different uses for this report here, but also some useful information with the aircraft below. So quick example, we have 8 aircraft on the account. 6 are considered airworthy, but only 5 are registered with the FAA. So there are essentially 3 drones on the account that we should not be flying under Part 107 at all if they're truly not registered and grounded because of a safety, a maintenance issue. Then lastly, this is a quick kind of, how many users do we have on the account? How many pilots versus their currency or experience? So we have 2 with less than 5, and 1 with 5 to 10. And then it'll even break down our Part 107 compliance. So in this example, we have 2 107 compliant operators and 2 that are missing their 107 data. It is worth mentioning, if at any time you need to pull your data out of the account or you want to slice and dice some custom report, you can pull these CSV, basically big spreadsheet files, out of your account at any time. So, you know, depending on what you're looking for, you can pull that section, sort it by aircraft, by pilot, by time of day, whatever the case might be. One you probably will use if you're tracking, you know, currency and recency, making sure your students are accumulating time throughout the course. So making sure maybe they're staying all even, or one's not falling behind or getting too far ahead. This is going to be a quick way to double check, you know, how much time have we gotten in the last 30 days versus total time on the account. And then lastly, the mission report. This is probably not going to be too exciting for you guys because you're going to be flying in similar locations frequently. But you'll notice, so it's basically our mission activity broken down geographically. And if I start clicking into some of these bubbles, you'll see that it will start breaking that flight activity into groups. And as we zoom in, it can get more and more specific. And here's kind of the view. So you could imagine if we have multiple training areas that we go to, you might end up with a view like this. But, you know, if we're using like a practice football field, something like that for each of our flights, you're probably just going to get a big circle with a high number stacked on top of it. And this might not be useful for you because, again, you're going to be more involved. We're probably not going to be using the mission workflow where admins are approving, denying, assigning missions ahead of time, and then marking them complete. And the last thing I'll touch on before I just open it up to general questions, or we can wrap up early. This is something that David can help with. This is something that I can help with. And I believe we'll come up with some sort of template or standards for the rest of the users for your account. So you guys, as the teachers at your locations, will have a little bit more of the admin privilege to edit some of the details on the account, your aircraft, your batteries, things like that. David's a little bit more able to move between accounts to help you guys. So along with this come the permissions. So if we are opening up the platform to anyone to log in on their own, we will also want to make sure we limit their permissions on our account. So, you know, we could send out an invite, a simple email, you know, they'll get an email to register and get set up right on the account here. And if I head back to the People tab, once they're on the account, we'll then be able to go in here and check out their permissions. So if we have not changed anything, this is the default, which is basically admin, where you'll see most everything is just down the left-hand side here, which is like full control, unhindered. But then as we go through, you know, maybe as a student or as the pilot, you know, we don't want them to view everything, or let's say it's fine to view missions if we're sharing missions between pilots or multiple people are contributing to the mission, but maybe we don't want them to see the individual flights. So we can come down here and change it so they can only view their flights that they've logged in the platform. Same thing, maybe we only want them to edit their own, or maybe we want to lock down the editing completely where they can't change any of these details. So some of these you can see get very granular, and we can get pretty specific with some of them. If you have questions on any of this, please let me know. There are some templates. I think I can work with David to get one up that we can, you know, apply a pilot template to all the accounts. So if in case, you know, you totally forget about this whole permission thing and you go to invite a student, that they'll just default to the lowest permission, you know, a general pilot's permission, and not have full access to the account, like super user access. And the last point I want to draw on the permissions is if you notice we use this verbiage of assigned pretty frequently. And I wanted to point that out because I mentioned earlier in the call, I kind of described it as building invisible walls within the account itself. So if I head back to the People tab, instead of looking at their permissions, we can then look at their assignments. And if I open up this tab, so maybe we have a dozen drones, 3 dozen batteries on the account, but this pilot doesn't need to see all of them. We can also, when we set their visibility to view only assigned, edit only assigned, this is where we come to assign those assets. So there's the 1 drone they need to see. There's the 3 drones they need to see. So as a rough example, you'll see here on the, maybe, there we go. On the left-hand side, you'll see like the 8 aircraft and 8 batteries. But when this user logs in, they'll only see the 1 aircraft and those 3 batteries. So that's how we can kind of limit an additional control over limiting visibility and what pilots have access to or not. And other than that, we got through pretty much everything. The profile, I think, is handled better on the mobile app. So at this point, you know, we've touched about every piece of the platform. We've given you, you know, make sure you get your 107 information updated in your profile, round out that profile and get your phone number verified, steps to get your aircraft and your batteries added onto the account. If you have checklists, go ahead and load them in there. Pretty easy to edit them, delete them, customize them. So if you have something, go ahead, throw it in there. If you're looking for help, feel free to shoot me an email with, you know, maybe what your main drone is, or, you know, hey, I want a pre-flight checklist. Hey, I want a maintenance checklist. If you just give me some sort of idea what you need, and again, maybe happy to work with David a little bit more, you know, one-on-one on that, and we can push stuff out to the rest of the accounts. So I realize I threw a lot of stuff at you today. It is a good thing this is recorded, so if you ever need a refresher, we can go back and take a look. But if you do get stumped, if you do have questions, as David mentioned, feel free, you know, to reach out to him, and he can forward along to me. Or if you do reach out to KittyHawk directly, don't forget to keep David copied so he's in the loop and can help, you know, with IT or other moving pieces as needed. But yeah, I'll stop it there and we can open it up for questions if there's any others floating out there.
So does anybody have any questions? We still have 28 people here, so I feel pretty
Maybe
comfortable.
brain fried, and it's a
There's
lot.
people out here. Well, let me just say, I say it's about 11:40. I think we have been going a long time today. I think we've learned a lot. I mean, what I've caught on and off, like I said, I've been busy trying to build roads while people are traveling down them. So I've not been able to pay total attention to this, but obviously there's a lot of stuff I'm interested in. I will go back myself because obviously we have to run the program overall. If you have any questions if you have any questions that you might think of later, feel free to email them to me. You can do so through the conference by just going to the conference and doing that, or just email them to me. You've got my email address. Email them me that way. Anything I need to forward over to Kevin to ask questions, I'll be glad to do so. Wayne Bailey was also on the call for the most part here, and he actually is still on there. I see his things popped up. So again, he's learned a lot about this process. So he helps us a lot, and he will be in our meeting this afternoon at 1 o'clock. And remember, just to remind you that today we do have a meeting we do have a live session again at 1 o'clock to cover blueprints and things like that related to our courses. We also have that we'll be covering some of the operations manual and things like that. We also have at 2 o'clock, we have another live session with Nick Landolf from USI, who'll be going through the level 2 VSO materials. Whether or not you're currently doing you're planning to do the level 2 course this year or not, there'll be a good opportunity to listen to what it is, to see what training requirements are. So when you start planning for the following year, as you add to your courses, you'll know what the requirements are. So again, and let me say to you that KittyHawk applications are a part of our level 2 courses, because as a student flies, a lot of VSO, visual line of sight operations is what it's called. Visual line of sight operations is VSO. It includes, you're going to be you're going to be doing flight cards. And part of the flight cards is the process of documenting your flights, your check sheets, all those things that the FAA requires you to do. The way we're using it, we're not using their logbook, we're using the KittyHawk system, because that's what we have assigned us to do. So you're not going to just use KittyHawk, you're learning KittyHawk. Most part in level 1 is for your benefit, right? For FAA purposes. In level 2, your students who are certified will be added to the system and will be required to go through and document their information as part of the VSO certification requirements. So, you know, as we continue to move this drone program forward, we continue to show that the partnership between ourselves and KittyHawk. Our intent is to be able to take this program that we're developing now and to share it with others around the country. I have a number of states who have contacted me, and there are also people that are contacting Wayne related to how we're doing our programs. Our programs are unique, folks, in the fact that we're focusing on being pilots. We're not focusing on learning about drones for the sake of STEM. You're STEM. Everybody gets tied up in STEM. We're trying to train our students to be drone pilots. That means we need to understand, if you look at their courses and their curriculum, they don't spend the time in learning how to do check sheets and maintenance and all the things that we have to do, because they're focused on learning to fly for the sake of the technology. We're learning to become professionals. That's why we focus on VSO for our second level course, because it will take our students that have the 107 certification and move them beyond that into showing to demonstrate how they are more qualified than everybody else at that entry level. And KittyHawk Fleet Management Software operating system helps us demonstrate the professionalism, that we didn't go out and just go out and buy some Excel spreadsheet and document our information, or go buy a free fly-by-night application. But we chose to partner with an industry professional who professionals in that field use every day to document their flights. So we're not playing, we're training, and there's a difference. So just let you know, the more you use this, the more we'll know if you're using it, because we can see. We will be probably having to do some type of checks to make sure that you are using it, just to cover ourselves from FAA perspective, but also because that validates who we are. So I just didn't want to get off the line. Just while we're talking, we'll talk more about it this afternoon, and with VSO and other things as we go forward. And those of you that are piloting level 2 will be the greatest users of this system. And so we really will be rolling it out more and more. Any questions for Kevin before he leaves? Okay. Kevin, hearing none, I do appreciate your time. I appreciate your partnership with us and the partnership of KittyHawk. The objective would be that KittyHawk will be able to take this process that we're doing and expand into other states, moving towards getting these programs that are developing their drone programs across the country to be involved. Maybe, Kevin, you guys want to be working with Embry-Riddle. We are. I mean, we've had some stuff with Embry-Riddle. We're working with USI, who's also has contacts with Embry-Riddle. And maybe you want to work with USI also. You contact me, let your people contact me. We can put them in contact with them. And there's a lot of stuff. Pisco is another company. We've got some sessions at this summer conference related to their stuff that they're doing with level 1 courses. And I think the key is there is a market for KittyHawk to sell their wares, but more important, train their pilots on using this professional system. So when they get to the field, they want to use it as their professionals. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, well said. I just want to say I do really appreciate the chance to be here. I love talking about this stuff. I mean, as you could see, I could talk about it for hours. So thank you for the chance to be here. I hope everyone kind of had, hope it wasn't too much and there was some takeaway from it. So if you do get stuck, you do have questions, again, feel free to reach out. Just keep David copied or reach out to David and he'll escalate to me. Even if it's questions you don't want to answer, you don't want to ask in front of the group, glad to take it offline. Again, I'm here. I'm local to North Carolina. I'm excited to see the program taking off, no pun intended, but if I can be a resource for you, if I can, help with anything along the way, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm sure this won't be the last. And I look forward to, next time we get a chance to get together and go through phase 2, maybe.
Just one question for Kevin. We appreciate you, and we're done. The question for you, so those of you that like to leave, you're welcome to leave now. 1 o'clock, we will be back talking with myself and Wayne Bailey. Will be presenting on the curriculum and all the new materials that we've got for ID11 and ID12, including equipment guides and all that stuff. So it's going to be a packed hour, and then we'll go into the VSO with Nick Landolf talking about the level 2 courses. So, but Nick, I had a question. I had a personal friend of mine who runs a business he's actually located here in Johnson County, not far from West Johnson High School, if you know where that's at. The name of his company, I'm not going to give his name, but anyway, he is looking for someone to do, what they do is they put in the glass windows that goes on these big buildings. You know what I'm talking about? And they were originally just building the frames. Now they actually put the glass and all in there. He's got a building in Durham that has, that he needs to look at about 50 joints to ensure that the windows are in place. And it's a 10-story building. Yeah. And he doesn't want to have to, for him to go out there and do it personally, he has to rent a crane and whatever, costing him thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah,
and he contacted me to see if I could do it. Well, my drone's not working right now. I've got some issues with my drone, and so I couldn't do it. The question is that something, do you do things on the side, or do you know somebody that you would recommend? It's in Durham, so it's not too far away from you.
Yeah.
If you're interested, let me know. I'll be glad to put you in contact with him. I'm not sure what he's willing to pay, but the deal is he obviously is cheaper than in buying machines to do it. Now, this was several days ago, so hopefully he's still, I sent it out to everybody, and I didn't get any response back from my teachers. So I'm looking for somebody who can do that work for them.
Got you.
And let me say this to you. He is, he does this work. I mean, that's what they do for a living, put in these windows. So I would say that if there's something you guys, whoever could do this, that this could be a whole new area of work in this field for a drone operator.
No, that's great. Just like we started out, I hear these use cases that never even crossed my mind before, and totally familiar with construction and that use case. But yeah, inspection of joints on glass panels, that totally makes sense. That's one of the number one use cases we hear on ROI is scaffolding, cranes, things like that, where we would traditionally have to bring equipment in to just get that view of, does work need done? Drones save some companies millions and millions of dollars just from putting up scaffolding. So if one of your teachers here is available and would like to take that, or get more information, I'm not going to stick my head out or step on any toes there. if he is just in desperate need of help, I'm sure I could point you in the right direction. So yeah, maybe we could follow up on that one offline if you're still looking for it.
Yeah, I got somebody just sent me a recommendation. I was trying to find individuals who might want to do it. That's originally my thought, was to get some of my teachers that might be in the business, trying to get in the business so they can give them an opportunity, before I went out and reached out to professional organizations to do it.
Gotcha.
There are other people doing things, I know that. And there's easy way of going out and finding other people, but I just want to make sure that there was some opportunities for some teachers or others. I didn't know if you personally on the side did the work. That's why, again, I wanted to give you an opportunity if that's something you wanted to do.
I'm 107. I'm not sure, depending on the quality. It sounds like he might want someone with a Zoom model that doesn't have to get, right up close to the building and can, keep some distance, but zoom in with the camera to get those really high quality close-ups on those joints. So if someone has something that fits those lines, that's probably going to be the best candidate for them.
Yeah. All right. Well, I just thought I'd ask if anybody else there does have it. Please let me know. Email me, text me, and we'll be glad to forward your information over to the individual. Definitely something worth looking into. There's lots of opportunities out there. Guess what, folks? You guys can go out and get your own company started if you have the ability to do things like that. And go to these companies that are contractors and stuff like that and say, look what I can do for you. And do it for free, because if you do it for free and you show them, they don't cost them anything to do it. And if you can demonstrate what you can do, they may say, shoot, that saves me a bunch of money. How much you charge me to do it for real, right? I mean, I think that's great. And we're going to, in level 2, we'll be talking about entrepreneurship. And so some of that, we'll cover some of that this afternoon. Well, look, it's 11:51. I appreciate you guys being here. Contact me if you have any questions. Contact Kevin if you have any questions. Contact Wayne if you have any questions. We appreciate you guys being involved. And we look forward to seeing seeing most of you back again at 1 o'clock when we do our ID11, ID12 blueprint updates. So thank you all. I'm going to close this out myself, and I hope you all have a great evening.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we'll talk soon. Thanks again.